body galore. Facing life head on, blowing fresh at the door. No limits, hard in it, yeah, be ready to soar. Every step that I take, every move that I make, anticipating, no more waiting, elevating the stakes. Some full stride, eyes open, captivating the scene. True life, my time, liberating my dreams. Every challenge that I'm seeking to meet, I'm overcoming, steady grinding, keep my beat to the street. I keep my mind thinking wise, hoping better to keep. Rising high, go get it with the vision I see. I'm getting clever, yeah. Special deliveries out. Special deliveries out on the way. I'm on that midday hustle and I'm hitting my stride. Clock ticking, never missing, no reason to hide. City passing while I'm moving and I'm taking it in. Hitting every door, crashing and I'm wearing a grin. Through this alleyway, stuck in, navigating the wake. Every package is a hustle, I'm wide and awake. No slowing, improving, making these cakes moving. Through with the take, ooh, with the thrill I create. Damn, it's a plan, no overstand, I'm free in my zone. Drop hit, pick it up, lose full control. Don't mind if I splash while I'm making these waves. Life like a knife, baby, and I'm cutting my way, I'm better.
In school, kids.
Have fun. The people in the sky are up all night. Yeah. I need this slow dance with the gravity. I eclipse with your hands all over me. Ooh, I swear, you got me way up there, a cosmic affair. Ooh, I swear, looking at you there,
Keep that applause going, everyone. Oh my gosh. So you just heard Kajay Kennedy, who you can see anytime this week on Broadway in, a little show called Wicked. So give her a round of applause. She was earlier. And she was joined by the amazing Micah Elijah Caldwell, an Obie Award-winning pianist, vocalist, and multifaceted artist featured in the Pulitzer Prize-winning musical A Stranger Loop. And breaking news, he was just booked for the national tour of Shucked. So give them both a round of applause. Extraordinary performers. Before we begin, everyone needs to take a seat. There's a whole front row. There's some seats on the side. So I'm going to give you a moment to come forward because we need y'all to sit down. Fire codes, my preference. Thank you all. And thank you for being here. Happy Climate Week. You've made it to Thursday. I applaud you. Give yourselves a round of applause. I am Danny Nierenberg. I'm president and co-founder of Food Tank with Bernie Pollock, who's, I think, in the back. He deserves a round of applause. Give him a round of applause. For those of you who don't know, Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems. We do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. And I want to turn, it's a weird shift to go from these Broadway performers to like the stuff we got to dig into, but let me talk about why we are here. 2025 is on track to be in the top 3 warmest years on record, joining 2023 and 2024. In the last 3 years, we have also seen the most widespread and damaging droughts in recorded history. So the urgency continues to grow, but many of us see COP30, the climate change conference that's happening in Brazil in about a month and a half, as an opportunity. And we're really excited about what the efforts that are being made there. Many of you in this room are working towards a lot of solutions. And what we're so excited about is that food and agriculture systems are finally at the table at COP. It took several years, almost 30 years, but over the last several years, really food and agriculture systems have been on the table. The COP30 presidency has named transforming agriculture and food systems one of the 6 pillars in its action agenda. Give that a round of applause. It's really exciting. Brazil is also behind another important effort, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, which was launched last year, giving us a chance to connect the dots between the cascading crises we face today. Biodiversity loss, the climate crisis, obviously, a public health crisis. So many things are happening. With this incredible focus on food, farming, and climate, we need to make sure that our political leaders don't waste this moment in time. It cannot be a COP of talk and just declarations. It must be a COP for action and implementation. And solutions like school meals, which we'll talk about today, give me so much hope. We need these win-win-wins to ensure that young people are nourished, farmers and ranchers are supported, and communities can thrive. Before we dive in, I want to thank our partners who have made today possible. A huge thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation, especially Sarah Farley and Emily Copel. Thanks to our hosts at WNYC. Give them a round of applause. They've made everything flawless. A big thanks to our culinary partner, Great Performances. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful breakfast they put together. You'll get a chance to eat more at lunch and the reception. To make sure that we end on time, and we will, I promise you, the conversations today will be very fast-paced, very dynamic. If I have to cut a panel short or a speaker short, please forgive me later. We want to hear from as many of you as possible. And whether you're in the room or tuning in online, and thank you so much for tuning in online, you can use the hashtag Climate Week NYC to share moments throughout the day. You can also email me directly at danielle@foodtank.com, and we will try to get back to you in real time. And by we, I mean Bernie is checking my email. I'm now excited to introduce somebody who's become a good friend to me personally and to Food Tank, Sarah Farley, the Vice President of the Food Initiative and the co-lead of the Big Bet on Regenerative School Meals. Give her a round of applause. Before we start, we have a really great video to play, so I'm going to cue that
Não é legal quando a gente planta e dá certo? Nós colocamos humus de minhoca, mas o maior segredo é isso aqui. Tá vendo esse monte de madeirinha aqui, ó? Sim. Ó, olha como a terra tá embaixo.
Ah, bem úmida.
Devagarinho, essa matéria orgânica ela vai misturando com a terra e as vitaminas que tem nela vai tudo pra terra. Aí vai dar cenourona grandona? Vai. Bom dia! Bom dia! Vocês sabiam que tudo que é produzido aqui no Vale Verde vai lá para a escola? A verdurinha que vocês comem lá na escola, os legumes que vocês comem na escola, é produzido aqui.
Nós ensinamos as crianças a importância da agricultura orgânica, inclusive para a gente pensar as doenças do mundo contemporâneo, colesterol alto, pressão alta, coisas que nós não víamos antigamente. Nós sabemos que existe uma relação intrínseca entre a alimentação saudável e o que é o nosso corpo. Por isso que a alimentação orgânica é importante, por isso que a alimentação saudável é importante. Porque eu conecto isso tudo com a saúde física, emocional, psíquica, com todos os elementos cognitivos que esse ser humano tem. Uma criança que tem uma alimentação natural vai ficar menos doente. Portanto, ele vai precisar de menos hospital e menos médico. Então, a gente olha para o ser humano inteiro.
Such a good way to start off as hopeful. Before we begin, Sarah, what is a big bet?
Happy to answer that question. I'm still shaking from the electricity of those Broadway stars. I feel like the tagline for this morning is come for the Broadway, stay for the regenerative school meals. So thank you Food Tank for being so fearless about how to create a really dynamic and inclusive conversation, because no one will forget how this day began. But yes, big bets. Big bets are the new way the Rockefeller Foundation philanthropies, but in a lot of ways, they're actually a really old idea. It was the first board meeting where John D. Rockefeller and one of the first board members, Frederick Gates, were in attendance, that they talked about the role of Rockefeller is to come in and take on the big challenges where either there's no existing institution to do it, or the size of the task is so large, it needs a really significant endeavor. And so the big bet is just that. It's big. We're going to go bigger. We're going to go deeper. We're going to stay longer. We're going to leverage more partnerships. We're going to be more fastidious about measuring impact, learning quickly, pivoting when we learn that things don't work, and I hope making an even bigger impact by supporting more of the wonderful partners, many of whom are in this room today.
It's so exciting, and I'm glad Rockefeller is taking on regenerative school meals. Can you sort of connect the dots of what regenerative school meals do for communities and for the world?
Yeah. You know, the regenerative school meal is the first kind of food times climate big bet that the foundation has made. And the reason we think it's so essential is in one solution, it's tackling a whole host of the challenges you spoke to. And it's really important that we take this on because it's a contrast to what you could call a business as usual school lunch. So maybe I'll just juxtapose the two. So in a lot of places, a business as usual school lunch might look like one commodity. Often that might be polished, imported white rice. That's really, really low in nutrition. You've got a ton of greenhouse gas emissions associated with the carbon miles to import that rice. And the growth of rice often really exacerbates methane release, which is a super potent greenhouse gas. So then let's contrast that to a regenerative school meal. I mean, first, that's a meal that really starts with the farmers. The regenerative or agroecological transition is about building the climate resilience of those that would feed all of humanity. It's about building back soil health, biodiversity. It's about nutrition, and it's about place-based. It's about seeing that the foods that are relevant to a culture, that are grown in their backyard, are part of the plate for this essential meal, often the only meal a child might get in a day. So really, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a transition from a school meal that is an essential pillar for human development, for cognitive development, but often can be kind of weak on nutrition and problematic environmentally, to a source of growth, prosperity for farmers, nutrition, biodiversity, water, soil health. That's the transition we want to see. And what's super exciting about it is really the market potential of a school meal is significant, right? A farmer needs lots of market opportunities, but in many countries, as much as 60% of what a government spends on food is spent on school meals. So you've got government already paying for the food. So let's link that commitment to what are the commitments from often a Ministry of Agriculture, a Ministry of Environment, a Ministry of Finance. So all those objectives come into one beautiful package, this meal that can really do a lot.
Yeah, as a Gen Xer myself who grew up in the business as usual school meal, it's so exciting to see farmer-centered, market-oriented, really nutritious meals being, becoming the norm in so many places. So congratulations.
Yeah, and places like Brazil. I mean, Brazil has taught us so much because they're this idea of a regenerative school meal. That's really where we took our inspiration. That and actually some of the leaders we'll hear from today in the United States as well. But in Brazil, you've got these policies where it is mandated that school meals first look at the small family farmer. In fact, it's now 45% of school meals in Brazil need to come from that family farmer, and policy on the books to actually pay more to ensure that at least 30% more can be agroecologically sourced. So you can see that it's possible. If Brazil can do it, the United States can do it. South Korea is doing it. It can become really a global movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just one final question. What are you most excited about today?
Oh my gosh, this is like a rock star 4-hour experience with this high bar set by our Broadway stars. But really, beginning, and I'm seeing some of them in the front row, as a mother, it's so awesome to have kids here that are part of our future, that are farmers and that are poets. We're going to hear from Sloane Spiegel, who's going to share her voice with us and really bring poetry and sort of the why for regenerative school meals in a really intimate way, because we're talking about children. So for everybody under 18 who's in this room, I'm super excited about you. Then I'm really excited about Dr. Jen Burney. She and her team did some research that we commissioned for the first signature convening on regenerative school meals that was held in Addis on the margins of the UN Food System Summit over the summer. And she and her team of climate modelers and physicists and this kind of extraordinary group are really helping model out what is the actual cost and how vulnerable are business as usual school meals given climate volatility. And her work is scary, but it's also empowering because it really gives, I think, a crisp motive, an undeniable motive to ministers of finance, ag, and others as to why we have to take this on. Then I'm super excited about Gerardo Martinez and the awesome team at Wild Kid Acres. I feel like listening to farmers, really hearing what is making this transition hard for you? What are your asks? What do we need to be doing better? He always rocks that awesome cowboy hat, so he's fun to watch. It's just every time you interact with Gerardo. And then also we've got these voices of folks that have a lot of years connecting regenerative farmers and farmers that are doing values-based agriculture into procurement systems. One of those is Isabel. She leads Solid Africa in Rwanda. Her outfit is extraordinary. And not only is she kind of doing this public procurement with Regen Foods for schools, but also for hospitals, for other institutions. And her, corollary right here in New York City in the mayor's office is Kate McKenzie, who's really been kind of lighting a path for those municipalities in the United States and elsewhere as how to do this. So just so many people. It's going to be an amazing morning. It's going to be a feast. And you, Danny, I think every time you put people in this little hot seat, you always bring out nuance and subtleties that make the conversation so much more rich. So I'm going to be listening to you too.
Thank you so much. Please give Sarah Farley a round of applause. Thank you. I am so excited for this day, and I'm especially excited for this next conversation. I get to sit down with Eitan Bernath, chef, influencer, author, and the supporter of the World Food Program. Please welcome him. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I know how busy you are, so it's really great to have you.
It's not every day you get a little before 10 a.m. Broadway performance,
I know,
so I
we're
enjoyed
so
that
lucky.
immensely.
Eitan, I'm wondering if we can start by talking about your journey in food and how that led you to the World Food Program.
Yeah, I started working in food when I was 11 years old. I competed on the first ever kids episode of Chopped. Before Chopped Jr., lost in the first round. And from there started a food blog where I started documenting what I was cooking. Somehow people cared and continued to do that over the past 12 years. I'm 23 now. I focus mostly on short form cooking videos and food related content. I published a cookbook when I was 19, Eitan Eats the World, and I currently also work on the Drew Barrymore Show as the principal culinary contributor, and we just started our 6th season, which I'm super excited about.
Congratulations.
With the World Food Program specifically, I've worked with the World Food Program for just over 3 years, and for me, I think what motivates me about it is, especially someone who works in food and, touches food all day long with what I do for my occupation, and just as someone who's not food insecure, I think it's so easy to take for granted that I could, open my fridge, open my pantry, and eat virtually whatever I want. First, let alone anything,
Right.
is a huge privilege that many people around the world don't have.
Absolutely. The last time we spoke, it seemed really important to you to sort of dispel the myths around humanitarian aid, and I want to give you a chance to do that.
Yeah, so in the food insecurity space, I work with the World Food Program kind of on their global work, and then even here in New York City, we live in what I would say is the greatest city on earth,
It is.
and we have some of the best restaurants on earth, 2 Michelin-star, 3 Michelin-star restaurants, yet 1 in 4 New York City children do not know where their next meal will come from. I think it's easy to forget when you live in the city that, if you go out to a nice dinner, while you're walking to that dinner, you very likely will pass someone who is food insecure while you're going to enjoy a nice dinner. And so, here in the city, City Harvest is an incredible organization that it's the first and largest food rescue organization. So, here in the U.S., we have so much food, and so much of it goes to waste. And so City Harvest, works with partners all around New York and local states to get food that's in excess and provide it to New Yorkers in need. And something that I think specifically that the World Food Program does globally and City Harvest does here in the city is making sure people get the food with dignity. Someone who cannot afford their own food deserves to enjoy just as high quality produce as those of us who can purchase it. And if you've seen the food that the World Food Program provides, or even just here in New York City, you can go volunteer at City Harvest's warehouse.
Yeah.
Whenever I volunteer, if this produce was not going to someone who needs it, I would happily take it home and cook with it.
Sure.
This is not produce that's been, sitting around rotting. It's, there's so much produce in this country that goes to waste that farmers, grocery stores, supply chains can anticipate that while the food's fresh. They know it won't go anywhere, and that's the food that's delivered.
Absolutely. We had Jilly from City Harvest on stage
I
earlier
love
this
Jilly.
week, and she's just the greatest. And I mean, the embedding dignity in what City Harvest does is just been, the mission from the very beginning, and that's so important. One of the things that you mentioned when we last spoke is not just preserving everyone's dignity, but sort of making sure that they have that joy and that excitement around food that we all get to experience every day. How do you think City Harvest does that?
I mean, specifically something that City Harvest does that I think is super impactful is making sure the food that gets to the specific communities in New York that need it is food that they actually would eat. So that's specifically, if there is a food pantry that they're supplying that's in a neighborhood that has a large Asian community versus a community that maybe has a large Hispanic community, they're not going to send plantains to the soup kitchen or food pantry that's in a community that would not culturally eat that. They want to make sure that when they're delivering food to people, it's the actual food they can then eat. They don't want that food to go to waste. Or, they have big programs for kosher food, halal food to deliver to Jewish and Muslim New Yorkers in need. And, they're very intentional about making sure that it's food that the people will want to eat. Because there's a lot of statistics that when people receive food aid, that is food they regularly do not eat. Just because they cannot afford other food, that does not mean necessarily that they will use all the food if you give them food they don't know how to cook. City Harvest does programming at their mobile markets, which you can volunteer at, where they will do live cooking demos to teach the people coming to the market how to cook that food. They give out recipes, really making sure that the people getting the food, it's food that they will want to eat.
Yeah, that cultural relevance is really, really important. Sarah and I talked about sort of the business as usual school meal that has been in place for a long time. Your audience has kind of grown up with you, and I wonder, how their palates have changed because school meals are really evolving.
Yeah. I think in terms of school meals, it's something that both City Harvest and the World Food Program do a lot on. The World Food Program is the largest provider of school meals globally. Over 20 million children get school meals from the World Food Program. Here in New York City, City Harvest has an incredible program in the summer called Share Lunch, Fight Hunger, because many students here in New York City rely on their free school lunch meal as their primary source of nutrition and calories. And during the summer, when they don't have that leaves these students unsure where they'll be able to get that meal. So it is a program here in the city that provides extra food assistance to these families that are vulnerable to ensure that these children get food during the summer as well. And I think specifically in terms of, what I've seen is, when I went to school, school lunch, I feel like was something that people would either be very excited about. I honestly would bring a lot of school lunch from home. And I think that, the important part is, the last thing a kid should worry about when they're trying to learn and, get educated to have a bright future is, being hungry during class. I'm someone, I always joke that I get very hangry if I don't get food. And, the last thing that kids should worry about, especially, anywhere in the world, but especially in a city like New York City where we have more than enough food, is hunger and to be able to eat and, not feel like, in so many parts of the country, there's systems where students, if they can't pay their food lunch bill, they won't get food. And so they have to sit next to their friends whose parents can afford food. Right. And that's just ridiculous.
What goes back to dignity
yes.
that you mentioned before. Kids deserve dignity
yes.
as well.
Yeah, no, it's insane that we live in the wealthiest country on earth and there's children who cannot afford school lunch. That's crazy.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Shifting gears a little bit, you make a lot of fun, upbeat content as an influencer, as a creator, and I wonder when you're using your platform to talk about these issues, to talk about City Harvest, to talk about WFP, how does that resonate with the folks who are following you?
Yeah, so using social media to try to reach people about something as important as this, there's a fun challenge, especially with the current kind of algorithmically distributed content systems that exist, of getting the viewers' attention, keeping them so they watch the full video. If I just posted something of me, just straight talking to camera about the World Food Program or about City Harvest, people just with human nature who are going on their phone probably just to, whether they're in between a meeting, sitting on the toilet, you want something to entertain you. Maybe it's not, learning about food insecurity is not the exact thing you're going on your phone for, but it's important. And so no matter where you're scrolling, I think something that I really try to do is figure out how to make a video and make content that is educational, entertaining, and informative, which is not easy. I don't always know how to do that, to be honest, but that's the goal, because the goal is to be able to reach people. I think the reason why I feel so passionate about talking about food insecurity is my audience is already interested in food, and I think it's an easy vehicle to kind of keep their interest and get them to watch the full video and to get involved. And I think it's something that I can already connect with my audience on food. So being able to have them pause and realize how fortunate they are, or assuming most of them can afford their food,
Right.
to not take that for granted. Because it's something I try to remind myself very frequently because
Sure.
it's so easy to forget.
Yeah, connecting those dots for your viewers, I think, is so important. What's the response been from them on these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get asked a lot, how can I get involved, especially if it's younger people. They say, I don't have money to donate. What can I do? Volunteering your time. If you live here in New York City, City Harvest is always looking for volunteers, and they actually make it a very fun process. You can, look in your pantry if you have, maybe you accidentally bought too many canned goods of chickpeas that are, not expiring for 2 years. You can donate those. You can talk to your friends about it. I think what's really important is there's no action too small. I think when there's such big issues, you hear numbers from the World Food Program. Over 700 million people in the world are at the critical level of hunger. 300 million extreme level of hunger. That can feel very daunting. But the reality is we all can do our own part. And I would say that the best thing you could do is donate your time. I think that is the most important thing you can do.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something that you mentioned before about cultural relevance of food and how important that is. And I wonder how you communicate that to your viewers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really passionate about learning about other cuisines and cultures. A lot of the content I do is travel-based. One of my favorite trips I did was I went to North India in the state of Bihar and did content about some incredible programs supporting farmers, supporting women. And I think it's a really easy way through storytelling to, I think people resonate with individual stories a lot more than numbers. And so that was a great way to, show these programs. There was a program that I was highlighting in a bunch of villages where they were teaching women how to raise their own goats. And so these women who typically, historically are very marginalized and don't have access and, without a way to earn income are, then less powerful. And so these women are able to earn income and, I, showed video footage and speaking to these women about how empowered they were about being able to, pay for their children's schooling. And not a single woman there spoke about anything she bought for herself. It was all about supporting her family, and it was incredible about how much pride. I think a lot of people, want to be able to, no one wants to have to get a handout. And so I think some of the most incredible programs out there are also just supporting people and helping them, kind of teaching them how to fish in a sense. And that was really impactful. And I think my audience responded very well. The stories, we connect, I think, on an individual level, and I think that's very effective.
Yeah. You're such an upbeat person, especially in your videos, and you're really, encouraging people. The world is a little bit dark right now, and I wonder what personally gives you hope to keep that upbeat attitude.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a big thing that I recommend is deleting social media and the news from your phone on the weekend.
On the weekend, he says.
On the weekend. No, on the weekend. It's my job during the week. I think that's important. I think I'm very much a news junkie. I have every single news app on my phone with alerts. I like to know what's going on in the world at every moment in time. When I wash dishes during the workday, I'll put on the news. And I think we live in a time where, we're just constantly fed information. And it's easy to forget that, if you go back 200 years, you didn't know what was going on at every moment in time. And obviously it's important to be informed. It helps you with your advocacy. But you don't have, I think something that I've realized is nothing will change if I find out about something that happened, especially on a weekend when it's good to reset, right when it happened or a day later.
Sure.
And so that's been something that's important because in order to, do your work and, try to contribute in activism and everything is you have to take care of your, kind of, put your own oxygen mask on first. And that's my number one thing. And I think that keeps me kind of recharged, at the start of the week. And to, also I think spend time hearing positive stories. I think social media is just a cesspool of negativity. And to, seek out positive content, hear about positive things going on in the world. And not that you want to ignore all the awful things going on in the world, and those are important to focus on, but if that's all you're paying attention to, it can really make you down, and I think it's important to keep yourself positive.
Absolutely. Self-care, I think, is something
Yes.
that Gen Z is doing really well. They understand that they have to
I don't know about
understand.
that, but
No, I mean, they understand that they, going off social media is
Yes,
important,
very important.
sometimes. I think I'd love to ask you, as somebody who is also on social media, what kind of content do you find most effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling and positivity, and it can be hard, especially in a space of hunger, just not a positive topic, is talking about also what works. Obviously, it's important to talk about the problems, but, on that trip I did to India or some other trips I've done, talking about food insecurity is talking about what does work. As you guys just spoke about a few minutes ago, there are so many solutions that are working that obviously need to be scaled. And I think that being able to see what's working and to share the success stories can just educate others about what's working and what they can try, and just again motivate yourself. I think that it's such a daunting issue, and I think breaking it down to what is actually achievable, whether in your own community. My grandma Bobby now lives a few blocks from my parents in New Jersey, but when she used to live in Ossining in Westchester, she would volunteer every weekend and sometimes during the week at her local soup kitchen. She's quite old. She couldn't do cooking. She couldn't do much. She would, check people in. And I think that was, something that really inspired me growing up was, she's very old. Very, very, you would think if Grandma Bobby could find time and a way to help, then we all can, or we all should be able to.
Absolutely.
She now has hit the point where she can't. She sticks to donating, which is great as well. But I think that's something that really inspired me.
Yeah, that's great. Grandmothers are great for that. You've grown up as a content creator. I wonder what advice you have for other young influencers and creatives who want to be like you.
Well, first I'd say don't do it. It's a job not for everyone. But I think the important thing is to, know what your goals are. I think something that, frustrates me a little is everyone's like, authenticity, which is important. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for it to be your career, it's your career. And I think to treat it like that. When I was 12 years old, my third ever blog post on cookwithchef8ton.com, a now defunct website, was sponsored by a chocolate chip company for $100, which paid back for like a tenth of the groceries my parents had paid for that month. And I think just, knowing what your goals are, separating yourself from your work is really important. It's something I've had to work on a lot is, I describe this job as having a boss that changes what they want constantly, won't tell you what it is, and is very brutal. I could spend a whole day on a video, post it, and it'll totally flop. And I have no idea why. I could take a guess. I could try again. But it can be very hard when your job and what you're doing all day is your face and your work for it to flop. And it's something I've had to work on a lot. My friends sometimes will joke if they call me and I sound down, they're like, what video did bad today? And so to try to separate that is, I think, very important because... And to be honest, it's not something I'm always great at, but it's very important to separate yourself from your work because it can feel very daunting. If something does bad, people love to blame the algorithm. I blame Eitan.
Poor thing. I'm sorry. Don't blame yourself.
No, don't cry for me. It's okay.
No.
Boo-hoo.
It's really good advice, though. You have a book that I want to make sure gets promoted a little bit here because I think it's a great book and it's
Thank
fun.
You. Yes, Eitan Eats the World. My cookbook. It is, I kind of described it as comfort food from around the world. I've always been really fascinated learning about the cuisines of the world. And something I try to do in my content is, I can't teach you how to make the best Indian curry. I'm not Indian, or garlic naan, but I've learned from my friends who are Indian and lots of incredible chefs, and kind of I learn with my audience.
Yeah.
Is kind of the angle I go in. I describe myself as a knowledgeable, very enthusiastic learner who's excited to take my audience on that journey. And this book is something I've worked on since I was kind of a young teen, that I was always dreamed I'd get a cookbook. A lot of these recipes are from literally when I was like 12.
Oh, I love it.
Spell checked, grammar checked once they were published. And yeah, it's a fun book. I think it's on sale on Amazon. So
What?
yeah, it's like $15.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great. I hope folks buy it. Where can they find you on the web?
You can find me online at Eitan, E-I-T-A-N. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you
conversation.
for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you. I think somebody needs to bring me a mic, but as we work to bridge, thank you, Bobby. Give it up for Bobby. As we work to bridge the arts, food and agriculture, and the climate movement, I am really excited to have a young poet come to the table. The 10-year-old Sloane Spiegel has a poem that she prepared to share with us today. So please give Sloane a big round of applause. I will hold this for you.
Why healthy school food matters. I sit in my classroom with a pencil and book, wondering what did my school chef cook. But if lunch is just fries or a gross pizza square, my brain feels too sleepy, and this isn't fair. Our bodies need protein to read, run, and race. We need healthy food to help us keep pace. We need fruits and veggies, a colorful plate, so when asked how was lunch, I can say it was great. If the only choices are sugared or fried, it's hard to pay attention, believe me, I tried. A rainbow of choice, it helps me think and create, to read, to write, and multiply by 8. It gives me the strength to run, jump, and play, helps me learn through a long, busy day. So listen up, grown-ups, the choice is clear. Good school food is something we should cheer. Start with our lunches, it's easy to see. Healthy food makes the best kind of me.
Yay! Good job. Thank you. Thanks, Bobby. Oh, she's amazing. I should also mention that her parents, Brad and Jess, are here, so give them a round of applause. In this next conversation, we're going to talk about how school meals can be a climate solution. So I'm going to be welcoming Emily Whedon-Chapman, the Global Lead for Social Protection and Labor Partnerships at the World Bank. Please give her a round of applause. Professor Apollinaire Zhikang, the Director General of the International Livestock Institute. And Alo Jelly is a Senior Research Fellow for the International Food Policy Research Institute. Moderating the conversation, we have my favorite journalist of all time, Dina Shanker, a reporter with Bloomberg. Give her a round of applause as well. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you everybody here in the room and on the live stream. I was hoping we could start with a quick introduction of yourself from each of the panelists, just about, a sentence or two about what you do. And then I thought maybe we could begin with a little bit about the impacts you've seen from the recent cuts to humanitarian aid from the Trump administration.
Thank you, Dina. I'm Aulo. My job is really to assess the impact of interventions like school meals. So I'm delighted to be here.
My name is Apollinaire Zhikang. I'm the Director General of the International Livestock Institute. I'm a geneticist by training. I lead ILRI, which is a global organization present in 14 countries. The impact of the cuts is calling for us to collaborate more, to prioritize, and then to focus on what we can do with limited resources to move the needle.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Whedon. I work with the World Bank, and I'm thrilled to be heading up our attempt to reach 500 million more people by 2030 with social protection and labor coverage. And I think a big piece of the cuts that we're seeing, particularly as we're being more ambitious with our targets across the organization, is, again, that need to work with partners in a new way, but also look for proven solutions, things that we know help people in multiple ways and across all stages of life. And school meals is definitely one of those that ticks that box.
Great. And so talk to me a little bit about the impact of the cuts on school meals specifically, and within that, on climate goals that school meals try to hit.
So my job in some ways, so let me just connect it a little bit with the conversations we had earlier. And school meals is a very powerful connector. If you, in the words of the Lion King that we saw this morning, if you think of the circle of life and the connections between it, school feeding is a very powerful idea that can really connect the plate, production, and everything that comes with it. And it's so powerful that every government and every country that we know, most countries in the world, are actually implementing to the scale of about nearly 500 million kids every day getting a school meal, and about $70 billion spent on it every year. But most of that money comes from the government. Okay, so it's important to contextualize the cuts from the US to the investments the government make. And governments invest in these programs because they're proven to be effective. You know, we know that giving school meals can bring children to school, make them learn better, and you know, keep them in school to attain better grades. And once they do that, you know, you improve their health and nutrition, and you know, you have a whole set of other benefits, including you know, longer and healthier lives. What we know, and maybe the critical part, is that it's a very good investment. So, you know, a study that tracked kids that had school meals in the 60s all the way through their life in Sweden found that, you know, for every dollar spent, you got $4 returns, mostly through their higher wages, but also through their health and nutrition. And the modeling work we did in other countries in lower middle income suggests similar rates of return. So it's a very good investment.
Great. It's so great to hear school meals discussed as opportunity rather than burden, which I feel like is usually how we hear people talk about them. It's like, oh, they cost so much money, and how are we going to do that? And now we have these new guidelines. But they really are an opportunity to do so many things, as you mentioned. Anything else that you guys wanted to add in terms of how the cuts are impacting the climate goals?
Well, we shouldn't lose the historical perspective. Where have we been? I think the school meals, we shouldn't leave that to the current wind and we forget about it. So I think the historical perspective of the school meal is there. You know, it's not just things for the poor countries. It's really building communities. You know, why? You know, the Greeks, the Romans, they had that. Going to school meant something. You go and get access to some food. And that's the story that continues. We could even personalize that. Myself, I'm a recipient of a school meal, not because we could not be fed, but simply because in our community, this is the western part of Cameroon, we needed to supplement our food with more nutrients. The local school is really where you build a community. Everybody comes there. 3 times per week, we had the porridge full of milk, you drink, and then they even teach you to brush your teeth. So I think we shouldn't forget that. So those are the things that we should always go back and look. But today, we can actually look at the school meal from outcomes. You know, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to build communities, healthy diets, people who are thriving in their community, and link that to the food system and make them more resilient and source from local producers. You can tick so many boxes. And I think this is where we reprioritize, we get the government to do this. It should not be left to aid and things like that. So it's my call that in all countries where we have seen benefits and continue to see the benefits of school meals, it should then be the priority of the governments to do that. You build communities. In the story, the Rockefeller, you had an event in Addis not too long ago. A young girl from northern Ethiopia came in. She championed why she pushed for school meals at her school. And the whole community rallied behind it. So this is a way to build communities and to do so many things. Thank you.
No, I would just pick up on that. And I think school meals occupy a unique space that is more fundamental to our community. Just as you said, there's a history there. And they're 99% funded by national budget. So it becomes distinct from the questions of the global aid crisis that we're facing. And I think what we're seeing is there is just an innate understanding of the importance of bringing children together and making meals. You know, in Washington, where my kids are in school, they learn life skills. Every year there's a different life skill that's taught alongside the regular curriculum. Usually it's athletic things like how to swim, how to bike. But sitting down and eating with peers and understanding the importance of that meal share and how to interact with people, I think is equally a life skill. And I think school meals brings that to the table. But sort of jumping back on the national commitment, what we then see from governments coming to the World Bank on the school meals question is very infrequently for financing. Occasionally, yes, they want to expand beyond their current reach and go toward universal coverage if they can't afford that within the national budget. But much more often, it's about reform of programs that exist. And how can they do more because they see the potential for the climate outcomes. And I really want to stress here for the job outcomes, for the connection to the local community, even in communities where women may not have the opportunity to work. The school is a safe space where women are welcome to work. Women are often working on the agriculture value chain anyway, and this gives them a captured market. And so we're able to see, there's a program in India that gave one-time capital grants to women, and a decade later, it had almost 500% returns on that single one-time investment. These are women who, it was not specific to school meals, let me clarify, but they were working in agriculture value chains, and even without a captured market, a decade later, they had almost 500% returns on their profits. And so if we could connect them to school meals, which we know should be sourced locally, give them the education of regenerative practices, we could really untap something. And that's what governments are coming asking. How can we do more with the money that we're already spending?
So I'm now hearing a couple of studies or looks at the impact of school meals where we're talking about seeing impacts like in measurements of decades or longer. My US-centric perspective tells me we don't have attention spans that long. We tend to want to see impacts, by the next election.
Right.
And so I am curious if you guys have any examples of really quick turnaround impacts, and sort of how we should think about implementing those and then really highlighting those impacts and showing how beneficial these things can be.
Right. No, we have run trials, and we picked up effects over a 6-month period. We picked up effects over a 12-month period on kids' learning, kids' diets, and behaviors of their caregivers, including behaviors related to mental health. But the question, like Emily is saying, is really, how do we make sure that the programs are making the best return, right? So how can they deliver across education, nutrition, agriculture, employment? Because that's not a given, right? How do we make these connections work? And we need a little bit of a better handle on how to manage potential trade-offs, right? Because what could work for a kid may not necessarily work for the farmer in some ways, right? So we need to understand how to best do it. And that requires maybe a little bit more time. But the benefits for kids, you can get them pretty quickly.
I believe that because I have kids and I see the difference between a hungry one and a well-fed one.
So let me highlight one example on the poultry. In Kenya, Ethiopia, the work that we've done there, but also in Uganda, the work by Iowa State University, having poultry facilities at school, having young boys and girls being interested in farming. 1 egg a day, they get the manure, they can have a little garden there growing some vegetable and things like that. School retention is there. People are excited, they understand agriculture. They can even explore career options at that age. And the Ugandan government actually is looking at trying to get that as part of the curriculum that you could graduate high school with. And with that 1 egg a day for those who are not going to have access to highly nutritious food at school, guarantee that they continue to be fed properly. And then you have home economics, which is also another dimension. They have to sell the eggs, they have to consume, they sell. You have a whole system at school. And I think these are some examples that you can score now, medium term and also long term. You continue to see the impact. You're building people who will be in communities, but also very strong global citizens, understanding what local development, community engagement means. And I think that's really, really important.
Yes, and I think bringing back home ec in the U.S., it would be like one of the biggest things we could do to improve diets and get kids to contribute more in the household. Not that I think about that kind of thing. So just last week, the New York Times Magazine ran a cover story with the headline, "Is the World Giving Up on Climate Change?" A lot of problems right now feel really urgent, and climate change has a way of often feeling remote. I mean, until the water's coming right under your door, and then you're like, climate change. But should climate play a central role in school meals when things like just delivering the school meals to the table, or making sure that those school meals, that people can fill out the paperwork to get their school meal? We have so many what feels like really urgent necessities on the school meal front. Climate can feel a little bit down the road. How should we think about climate when we think about school meals, and where on the priority list should we put it?
Well, I think, I mean, going back again to earlier in the day and the statistics that have been rattled off already, I don't know about here in the US, but certainly in most of our client countries, climate change is here and it's a reality. The water is coming under the door every day. And people can't ignore that. And we see it particularly in some of the more arid countries. But I think also with typhoons, et cetera, et cetera. When we talk about delivering school meals, we do a lot of work, and this is going to get real nerdy real quick, on the system that allows for that delivery. Because once you create a strong digital system that has the capacity to reach those at the last mile of services, layering on top of that service the complementary support, the tailored support that people need to go alongside income support so that they can make the most out of that income support, isn't actually that much harder. So investing in the base system that allows us to reach people with a basic safety net, whether they need it most of the time, just occasionally during crisis, or in the case of school meals, whether it's an everyday delivery. Once you have that system in place, how to tailor it, how to layer on top of it, because it becomes something that's really right at your fingertips. And so I think it's a false dichotomy to think about if we're trying to do too many things at once. Once you have a strong system, doing more becomes quite easy, and giving people the capital that they would need in order to strengthen their agricultural production and link into the school meal system, deliver messages, whether through text or through other digital means if possible, is something that really can unlock those opportunities and make climate an integral part of the delivery itself.
So I'm curious, here in the US, we've recently seen a number of actions from the government that don't bode well for school meals, even if that's not the direct target. So most recently, the USDA said they're not going to collect data on food insecurity anymore. We saw big cuts to SNAP, which will filter into school meals. We saw cuts to local food programs that were bringing local foods to schools. I was hoping, given your international experience that you guys all have, if you could provide any examples of times where the government was not supportive of bringing healthy, nutritious, environmentally sound school meals to the table, and local communities persevered and thought that could be a nice, optimistic.
Right. No, and building on, yeah, it's a great question. And building on what Apollinaire said, once the community, there's buy-in from the community, it's very difficult to turn the tap off. So school meals in Latin America, maybe the program that's most advanced alongside Brazil is Chile, right? Chile managed to develop the program throughout the Pinochet years. And Pinochet was not able to touch it because parents, communities were saying, don't you dare, right? And that's the power of having the community engaged, right? And having civil society can help advocate for the program, but it can also ensure that program funds are used properly, because things can go wrong with school meals and funding. It's a lot of money. And it's very important to have those checks and balances in the system that Emily was talking about.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Of course.
So is the community activism that you're speaking of, is this coming from like opposing politicians that are bringing people together? Is it really grassroots? Is it parents coming together? Is it like is it the farmers? Like, who is making this something so embedded into people's lives that it simply cannot be removed.
Absolutely. So remember the connector idea, right? So the connector idea is that underpins everything. It's you're investing in my children, our children, right?
Right.
So it's the parents. And then the parents, it's the farmers, it's the community. I remember a mayor saying to me, this preschool meal is actually helping my job as a mayor because it's bringing everybody together. It's a very powerful idea. And if you use that to sort of provide that check and balance with the data, with data, and give them tools, give people tools to be able to respond quickly to issues. And information flow and giving a voice then becomes, catalytic. And we have plenty of examples of that. But just to add on what Emily was saying, I think with climate and agriculture, the intent has to be clear. Yeah, don't assume that all these things will happen just by chance. Be very specific about it, and then you can really program for it.
Great, that's good. That's a good lesson to have. Are there any, we're talking a lot about all the things that should be involved, and I'm curious, what parts of school meal program have you guys seen that maybe can be compromised a little bit, that turns out are not necessarily essential, and when there are so many competing priorities, are things that can maybe give way to things that are more important?
I don't have a specific example, but I just want to bring it back to the community. The moment you create incentives for parents, for schools, the whole educational system, to see that as part of sustaining the whole education, it's not going to fall apart. And you can also link that to local producers. You can create circular economies in schools, in homes, and things like that. So I think that's, for me, what will be left. There will be some shocks, to the whole thing, but the whole framework will remain. And I think this is essentially I would support school meals because I'm a beneficiary. And people who stayed in my community will continue to do it because it's something that they've benefited from it. And I'm very hopeful that, we can use that beyond to even create incentives on how you bring communities to tackle the issue of climate change. Going back to the New York Times question, we shouldn't give up. We have solutions. We are committed to do that. We have communities. If we create the right incentives, engage in the right conversation, people will contribute in mitigating and adapting to climate change. That's my message. It's just that often we are not in the same conversation and we expect people to understand what we are saying. But you can deliver climate benefits just through school meals in a school. Absolutely.
I would just pick up on that in terms of what could fall aside, or how the program might specifically be designed to pick up on the community piece and involving mothers and fathers and farmers. They'll know best what can fall aside. They'll know best what the program should look like in their school for their children. And so when they're involved in the production of the food, they will be invested in having it be climate smart. They will be invested in making sure their fields are rehabilitated and that their children get a healthy meal. So I think if, again, we go to the grassroots of it, that will tell us. I think it naturally happens. I think the community knows what is needed, and bringing them into the conversation and not having it be a top-down decision process is better for the climate, but it's better for the program and the people.
I actually did comment in my school meal WhatsApp group that I noticed my children were coming home with chocolate syrup smeared on their faces and clothes, and I was wondering what that was about.
Mine is the day they get the French toast sticks.
That's what they were dipping
into the syrup.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They thought the chocolate syrup was better than the syrup, and I was like, I feel like they're both a little excessive, but maybe we could limit the amount of dippable sugar that we are handing out.
Please.
And then I said, and don't tell my kids, that was my suggestion.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank
you.
you, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. And I love how this panel, showed how school meals are good for a lot of different things, and job creation for women, obviously good nutrition and life skills for kids, the opportunity to see agriculture as an opportunity, all really great things. And, just building good citizens. So I have time for a shameless plug for Food Tank. If you like summits like this one that bring a lot of cool people together, especially Broadway performers, consider joining Food Tank by going to foodtank.com/join. If you join today, you'll get a beautiful cutting board. So end of shameless plug. I'm really excited for this next, I'm going to call it a panel, okay? We get to bring a bunch of farmers' voices into the conversation, and I get to welcome to the stage Gerardo Martinez, the founder and owner of Wild Kid Acres and the founder of the Global Alliance of Latinos in Agriculture, who is joined by a bunch of young farmers who I'm really excited to have with us today. So give them a round of applause.
All right, you ready?
A lady pulled into our driveway. She said hi to my dad, got out of her car, and broke down crying.
So I'm the son of a Mexican immigrant and an Arab immigrant. So timeliness and empathy are not like within my fortitude of like skill set. So sorry, Danny. That's why I have a security crew today. So I'm here to talk a lot about Wild Kid Acres, mainly these kids that helped me on my farm. That was the impetus of like what began as my farm. So originally from Chicago, I hated farming because my father was a migrant worker. Vowed to never be on a flower farm, and obviously that didn't work out well. But I eventually started my own company after serving in the corporate world for a while after the Marine Corps, and I hated corporate life. I started my own company, and I got a job to go to Cameroon, Africa. And in Cameroon, Africa, the farm is defined differently there. Like, it's not just where you go to buy food or buy food from a farmer. It's also the center of the community. It's where you go for faith. It's where you go for the schooling. It's where you go for community dancing and all that stuff. So when I got back from Africa in 2019, I realized that I wanted to give that to him and my other daughter, who's not here right now. But when we came back from Africa, I told my wife, like, we got to become farmers. We got to do this homestead thing. I found this piece of land in Maryland, in Edgewater, Maryland, that was essentially a brownfield. It was a dump, an unofficial dump, but a dump. And I thought, I can afford it. So I convinced my wife to move into an RV, and we were going to start farming. The plot of land was so entrenched with trash that it was 10 feet deep in most places. Also, the house that we bought with it was condemned the day we closed, and we didn't know that. So we started building the house by ourselves. My son and I would watch YouTube videos every single day and start building the house. At the same time, COVID hit. So we're living in an RV on this open space full of trash, and we're starting to build a house, not knowing what we're doing. And the neighbors started noticing. They're like, oh my God, this guy's nuts. And like, he's got all these kids out there. What is going on? And then we started getting cows because we got really deep into regenerative agriculture. Because the land was so trash, like, I obviously didn't want my kids to be around toxins, but I also had to spend time building a house, so I couldn't be fully involved in production. I had to learn how to regenerate the land without the use of an intensive labor concept like most farms. So what we would do is I would build a house all day. At the end of the day, we would rotate animals. Those animals would uncover trash. We would pull it off. And then the kids would figure out ways to put more organic matter, whether that was wood chips from the tree service companies, food waste from the schools, anything we could do to regenerate the land. All at the same time, living in a trailer and hating our lives and having my wife almost kill me. But we started getting like a lot of like interest because people in Maryland are super nosy. I think everybody kind of knows that. But people kept pulling in and like, why are you guys so crazy? Like, what's up with the animals? Why do you have a cow on the street? We had no fencing. We had nothing, not even a house. So they're like, what are you doing? So like over 2020, we pushed everybody away. We were like, do not come. But then that lady pulled in. And I'm not like the most empathetic person in the world, so you can cry in front of me and I'll just stare at you. But she convinced me to open up and started asking me about regenerative agriculture. Started asking me about like, why are the kids moving the animals and not you? And she convinced me to open up. So we started opening up, and the community drove into our house every single day. Like, we had thousands of people lining up just to come to our farm. So in 2021, we decided to fully invest into this. I moved into my house, thank God, and we decided to open it up. In 2021, over the course of just Saturdays, we saw 6,000 visitors of just me and my family. Then we started realizing we had something here. Maybe we can start programming. Maybe we can start education. Maybe we can start selling food, on this trash land. It'd be great. So we opened up and we let kids determine the strategic vision of where we were going. And they started asking me questions. Right, Cornell?
And I wonder why the food in my school tastes different than the farm's food.
Why aren't there farmers that look like me?
How do I continue my dad's legacy?
How can I become a farmer?
How do we grow food ethically and still care for our planet?
Why isn't anyone helping the farmers?
Thanks. Thank you for clapping. They're super nervous. Farming is a reclusive profession. But we started realizing that we had this super unique thing. So we started growing. Last year we saw 50,000 kids on our farm. We fed the schools off of donations only. These kids grew the food and they brought it to the schools. They brought it to the food banks. And now that those fundings are gone, we're doing it all self-sustained. We've never received a grant. These kids make our farm what it is, so self-sustaining. Now we're at a point that we realize our brand is super strong. We want to feed the community. That is who is making our farm successful. So we're starting the first ever farm franchise where we can place kids that want to be farmers on land that's not close to ours. And they can feed the community that they live in. So who knows, maybe these kids, as our farm grows, will be the ones that feed all the kids in your community. As Wild Kid Acres grows, you'll recognize the brand and you'll recognize these farmers as the ones who feed your kids. Thank you. Hey.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, keep that applause going. Those kids were great. I mean, Gerardo's great too, but those kids, that was the highlight of the day. I'm so excited that they got to be here. Before we start again, I want to thank a few more of our in-kind partners. Wawona Frozen Foods, the American Frozen Food Institute, Kiss the Ground and Buena Vida Coffee, and Organic Valley. Now I get to welcome someone to the stage who is a true heroine, Jennifer Burney, a professor at Stanford University's Dorr School of Sustainability and the Center on Food Security and the Environment. Please give her a huge round of applause.
As an academic, I don't often get woos, so thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for being here and for having me today. I want to talk about the work that my incredible team is doing, thinking about how we can build climate-resilient school feeding programs. So I'm going to step back and start with the definition of food security that is familiar, I think, to probably everyone in the room. But what I want to point out is that school feeding programs can play a really important role. And that's, of course, because children don't have economic or political agency, right? And so they depend on all of us for their nutrition. We also know that any insults to nutrition in childhood last a lifetime. So sustainable food security matters not just for individuals, but for communities and for entire economies. And when you look at the definition of food security, again, as a starting point, it's pretty clear that climate affects all dimensions of it. So we want to today think about mobilizing, of course, greater commitment and action around regenerative school meals, but I want to think especially about how to do that against the backdrop of a warming climate. All right, so when we look at school feeding programs around the world, here's just a brief summary map of what this looks like. There are school feeding programs in, like 170 plus countries in the world, something like 230 million children. We're trying to up that. But even now, in the programs that are counted, we are feeding something like 25% of the world's children in school. So this is a really big safety net, and it's expanding because, again, folks realize how important this is. However, from the vantage point of my research group, we're thinking about this, and we're seeing the number of countries that are feeding increasing numbers of kids, and the fact that some are producing food domestically for their programs, like what you just heard about. Some are importing food. This is a growing and complicated safety net, and the climate risk of this system is really poorly characterized. So what we're doing is thinking about what is the risk exposure of school feeding programs and the network of school feeding programs around the world, and how can we think about mitigating that risk to the extent possible. So when we think about school feeding programs, we want to think about, in particular, what food is going into those meals, and where is it produced, and what is it exposed to, and how's that changing? All right, so we're trying to do three things, excuse me. Number one, we're going to think about the impact of climate on production and prices of different meal components on the plate, and we're going to call this the silent cost of climate change. So we've done a really good job of characterizing what climate change has already done to our ability to grow food, and how that impacts programs like school feeding programs. But then we also want to think about how to address those issues. So the second thing we're doing is thinking about how to build resilience into this system. One way of doing that is to think about switches to regenerative agriculture. Another way to do that is to think about, again, the network of programs, not just say within a country, but across countries, and where there's systemic risk and maybe systemic opportunities for resilience, say through coordination or trade. So we want to think about making a globally sustainable social safety net. Oop, didn't mean to laser you. So how do we do that? We start with what's on the plate. When we look at this from a school meals perspective, we see these beautiful plates and we see delicious, nutritious meals for children at school. When my team looks at this, we say, oh, that's rice and beans and lentils and bananas and kale and wheat and oil and so on and so forth. And so we start by taking these plates in each country. We think about each program around the world, and we're thinking about what's on the plate and what it's exposed to while it's produced. So climate change has already affected every producing region on the planet. In addition, every producing region on the planet is exposed to a natural mode of climate variability like El Nino. So there's a lot of issues already day to day in stable production of food supply in many regions around the world. And we also know that that's going to change going forward. So we're thinking about what climate change has already done and what it's likely to do. And from there, we've taken data for every food product on the plates of all school meal programs around the world, and we have generated data to match all those programs with the growing conditions that they're produced in over time, and also climate models of how those conditions are going to change. And so we're able to say, for example, what yields and production of those products would have looked like absent climate change compared to what has actually occurred. And then we're able to project those impacts forward. So we're able to think about what climate change is already doing to school meal programs, what it's likely to do in the future, and how to think about mitigating those risks. So we've developed a broad library of climate and crop relationships, not just for the big crops produced globally like maize or rice, but also for more regionally important crops, like teff or yams, and so on and so forth. And so as an example here, we can get country-specific estimates for how all the crop growing areas within a country have been affected by climate change to date. And so here you see, for example, for Ethiopia, I just put up 4 crops here, negative impacts for 3 of them, and something like about 6% reduction in crop productivity, for example, of maize in Ethiopia due to climate change thus far. Most of the impacts around the world have been negative, not everywhere, but most. And so we're careful to make sure we're really assessing the local impacts around the world. So as an example, here's what we do. If we take a plate, this is just a characteristic plate from one of the programs in Kenya. So we've got rice, we've got beans, we've got some fruit. We match these products with the observed climate relationships that we've developed through that big library of data, and we compare we compare what would have happened absent climate change with what has happened now, and we look at, therefore, what would the cost of a meal have been absent climate change compared to what it is now. And we're able to convert that into a number of meals for a given program that are not served because climate change has already made it harder. So that's kind of the silent cost of climate change so far. And we're able to also project that in the future and think about how many meals are not served because it's already harder to grow food. So that's the silent cost. But we're also trying to think about solutions. So with another team, a fellow professor in a lab at Stanford who's built a library of regenerative ag trials around the world, and where there are paired comparisons between regenerative systems and conventional systems, and developed probabilistic estimates for what a switch to regenerative agriculture would mean for all these crops in any location around the world. And what these little waterfall plots here show you on the right is that for almost every country in the world, a switch to regenerative agriculture predicts higher yields for these big important crops. And so we then can do a similar exercise, which is to take these products on the plate, think about what current production and prices look like, and then say, okay, if we were able to switch to regenerative systems, now this is ignoring, of course, all the hard work to get that to happen, but trying to make the case for that work to be done, right? Which is to say, if we were to switch to regenerative systems, now we can say, in an equivalent way, here's the number of plates you could produce, and it's, in most cases, many more. So as an example here, here's data from 2 countries, Kenya, Ethiopia. Each country has 2 programs. The main program in Ethiopia is really quite large, something like 7 million children. And referencing kind of a business as usual case, you can see that for Ethiopia, for example, the current kind of cost of climate change is tens of thousands of meals not being served. And the current opportunity, those yellow bars, is something like 200,000 meals on the same budget could be served with a switch to regenerative grains. And these effects, when you start to add them up across regions and globally, are quite large. So we've finished preliminary analysis for all the programs in Africa, and it adds up to quite, in some cases, shocking numbers, I would say. So we've got about 60 million children currently being served meals in school, and we estimate the silent cost of climate change to be around 200,000 additional children that could be fed, and that's just from the emergent climate signal to present. That's not thinking about future climate change. But more importantly, when we think about agricultural system transformation, the kind of resilience opportunity for regenerative ag is more than 2 million additional meals, 2.5 million additional meals across the continent. And this is only from thinking about regenerative grains. We're still working to do all the other data analysis to put in regenerative fruits and vegetables. So these are low bars already, low estimates, but sizable numbers. And so we think that both the silent cost of climate change and the opportunity for resilience of system transformation is large. So we're expanding this work to include all programs and as many foods as possible. We're trying to get everything that's on the plate in every program. And we're trying also to compare what we find with, to use what we find to do scenario analyses. So to think about how can we, alter nutrition on the plate in a climate resilient way. So if programs want to think about diversifying, for example, the food products that they offer, we can now do analysis to say, what does that do to your climate risk exposure? Next, we really want to also think about regional scale climate conditions that could be especially detrimental. So one that folks might know about is El Nino. So El Nino connects, El Nino is this warming pattern in the Pacific Ocean, this sort of anomalously warm tongue off the eastern Pacific that arises every few years. And that actually swings around the climate in most regions of the globe. And it has been linked to childhood malnutrition. So in regions that get hotter and drier during El Nino years, you see an increase in the number of underweight children, and then that persists years later to show up as stunting. So we already know that these modes of climate variability matter, and they matter in a synchronized way. So when there's an El Nino year, as one example, right, many programs would be at a similar kind of risk. So how could we think about buffering these modes of variability that hit regions and larger swaths of the world at the same time. All right, and finally, we're working with teams, here in the room, many people represented, and around the world to try to start implementing these resilience strategies into policy and practice. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the day.
You're like, I don't care about groceries. Keep that round of applause going. Jennifer is a heroine, as I said before. I admire her so much, and I'm glad that somebody is thinking about, the school meals of the future and what we need to prepare for. I'm really excited for this next presentation. We have a keynote by Mariana Mazzucato, professor in economics of innovation and public value at University College London. Please give her a round of applause.
Not feeling completely in top form, so I asked if I could sit down. I hope that's okay. I'll have to keep turning my neck to make sure you guys all feel happy. So, first of all, what a wonderful set of presentations, and I hope mine builds on it, but I also want to be a bit provocative, which is to say, precisely because everything we heard is so important, wouldn't it be great if we actually had a public sector that got that, a private sector that got that, but especially that they work together on these problems that we've heard about and the relationships between climate, biodiversity, health, and well-being, and taking it as seriously as we know we take terrible things like war. And this is a very bad moment to be talking about war because we have geopolitical tension in many parts of the world. But what's interesting with war, or let's just call it the military budgets, is they don't just say, oh, we'll put a bit of money here, a bit of money there, okay, soldiers, go fight. We use all sorts of tools across the world on things like advanced purchasing agreements. That's what the military does in order to get cheaper products, in order to work well with the private sector. They negotiate all sorts of things like intellectual property rights if they're funding things, because they want to make sure that they continue to have access to the things they're funding. So this kind of more proactive way of thinking of what the problem is and being very clear on what they're trying to do, right? It's not just like, think of the moon landing. It wasn't just the space race. It was, we're going to beat the Russians. We're going to go to the moon and back in a short amount of time. So they have these so-called missions. And what's interesting is that as soon as you have a mission, it's interesting to start thinking, what are all the different sectors that you're going to need to help if you want, satisfy that mission. So going to the moon wasn't just aerospace. It was as much materials, nutrition, electronics. And they had all these problems they had to solve. You see where I'm getting at, because you heard today about a lot of problems. And I'll get to school meals in just 2 seconds, but I want to build up to it. All the problems they had to solve, they realized things like, what would the astronauts wear? How would they go to the bathroom? What would they eat? The first thing they realized in NASA is they had to change procurement. They had to change the way that the military was doing procurement away from what's called cost plus, which is basically just kind of, the race to the bottom in terms of who's going to provide something at the cheapest cost, towards challenge-oriented procurement, mission-oriented procurement with incentives for innovation and quality improvement. And so the guy who actually did that, don't ask me how I remember his name because I don't remember half of the things I did this week. His name was Ernest Brackett. He said, we will not be able to go to the moon and back without changing that procurement law. Okay, so fast forward to why we're here. We're not here to talk about war. What does it mean to treat all the problems that you are hearing today, and I'm sure there's going to be great panels after this, as seriously as going to the moon and back in a short amount of time? Imagine if the mission was making sure that every single child in the world had access to at least 2, let's say 3, but at least 2 healthy meals a day generated with regenerative agriculture, local manufacturing, and also making sure that the conditions of how that school food is made also has good working conditions, so on and so forth. We don't have that. We have, remember when Reagan also said ketchup was a vegetable? Why did he say that? Because he was trying to reduce the cost of school meals, and some of us even had T-shirts with Reagan and then ketchup, and it said, which is the vegetable. But that idea of actually taking really seriously not only these terrible statistics, I'm going to go through some of my slides, not all of them. We know that the global food system has extreme structural challenges. I actually just co-chaired with the president of Singapore and the head of the WTO, a water report where we called it the economics of water as a common good. And 55% of the global food chain is at risk if we do not treat water seriously. And 70%, by the way, of the water cycle comes from what's called green water. So when the ground transpires and then the water cycle continues, as long as we continue deforesting and hurting the biodiversity on the ground, these grounds are not spongy and that water does not transpire. And we show that 55% of the global food chain is at risk. So I'm sure you've heard lots of the terrible ways in which we're currently treating our food systems and our water systems, but the idea of a mission-oriented approach, which is what we talk about in this report, and hopefully you saw that little barcode in the beginning, is imagine if we actually took the idea of school meals as an opportunity to do what? To get, let me just get, sorry, to the actual slide. Here we go. You probably can't see that. As an opportunity to do exactly what we did to go to the moon. First of all, not just for one department. As long as we see school meals and school feeding programs as just part of the social protection part of a government or welfare policy, then it ends up not, well, by design, being taken seriously. What would it look like, for example, to do what Brazil is doing, that they say, you know, SDG 2, really important. They've put hunger at the center of their national policy. And then they say, what does this mean for the way that different departments in government, finance, industry, agriculture, education, of course, health, work together to actually commit to and to galvanize investment in both public and private actors, that mission accomplished, to make sure that every Brazilian child has access to 2 healthy, tasty, and sustainable school meals. And in the report, by the way, we look at what's happening in Brazil, which I'll say one more thing about, but also in Sweden and Scotland, and also some communities, my own community in Camden, where I worked quite a bit. And we look at what it meant for those countries, again, to take it as seriously as, unfortunately, we take military-industrial complex problems. And one of the things they did in Brazil, which is really interesting if you think of DARPA in the United States. DARPA, as you know, is the Defense Research Agency in the Department of Defense. They invested in the internet. In fact, I wrote a book back in the day basically showing that everything in your iPhone was actually funded by the taxpayer. So internet, GPS, touchscreen, Siri, DARPA was critical to that. But what they did in Brazil was they learned the lesson. They said, why is it, again, that for the military we fund things and then make sure we have access? They would never fund stuff that the soldiers didn't have access to. But for everything else, like health, and like food, we don't do that. We have funding programs. Think of the US. We have the National Institutes of Health that put in $40 billion a year for health innovation, and then completely separately in a different program, unaligned, we have Medicare, Medicaid, and different programs that are about making sure that people, well, in this country they don't, anyway, have access to health, right? So by putting them together, as we do with DARPA, ARPA-H here, ARPA-E, what they did in Brazil is they put their national food program at the center of their policy, at the center of how the different ministries were working, but also at the center of their institutional setup, setting up what's called the HAEC, the Health Economy Industrial Complex, where they're both investing in all these different areas that require innovation, new forms of collaboration, innovation collaborations, worrying about, again, getting the intellectual properties not to be too strong, too wide, and too upstream, at the same time that they're thinking about access of the citizens to those health policies. So I think that's an incredibly important point. And the other thing they've also done is they've put things like the hunger policy and the ecological transition policy at the center of the finance ministry. In the report, we also, as I mentioned, look at Sweden. What Sweden has done, they start with a very high-level challenge to make sure that they have a carbon-free welfare state. State, basically, like everything that the state, because welfare here means something very specific. Anyway, welfare state meaning what the state does for the welfare of people. And then, again, they bring it down to what it means for all the different ministries. And that's precisely why they then used the school food program as a way to make sure that they had that interministerial collaboration. And in Scotland, one of the things we looked at, I mentioned procurement, which is a demand-side instrument, also looking at the whole innovation system, so how they could use a new public bank, the Scottish National Investment Bank. It's a public bank, there's almost 24 trillion in public banks worldwide, but they're just funding cute little projects here and there, and they're not actually leading often to transformative change like the one we're talking about here. But Scotland thought about its school food policy as a way for the different instruments, the public bank, the procurement, the different grants and subsidies that governments have to, again, be better aligned. And don't forget that procurement, by being a demand-side instrument, allows small companies then to scale. So startups scale up. So if they can get the funding from different sources, it doesn't have to be a public bank, from venture capital, from different types of sources, they won't actually then scale. They'll just remain cute and little, but cute and little is not good, right? If they're not scaling, they might also then go bankrupt. So thinking about these public programs, like making sure that every child has a healthy, tasty, sustainable school meal, to generate that intersectoral, so in the business sector, investment, interministerial coordination, but also really taking seriously all those different instruments. I began with procurement, just mentioned public banks, but basically all the levers that governments have to actually be about well-being for society. Thank you so much. I had 100 slides, I showed you two. Reports in the front, so you can all pick one up. Thanks.
Take care. Keep that round of applause going. Thank you to Mariana. I'm now really excited to welcome to the stage our next panel, starting with Adam Met, a musician with AJR, an educator, advocate, and the author of the book Amplify: How to Use the Power of Connection to Engage, Take Action, and Build a Better World. My stepsons are obsessed with him, and I've seen him in concert. He's really great, and he really cares about things, so thank you. Round of applause. He's joined by Will Brinkerhoff, a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan who is studying crop livestock integration and agroecology. Give it up for him. That's the best thing to study. And moderating this conversation, we have a good friend of Food Tank, Shweta Chakraborty, who is the CEO of We Don't Have Time. I love you. Thank you for doing this.
Love you right back. Thank you. Hi, everyone. How's your Climate Week going? You're still bringing the energy. It's Thursday afternoon. We're not done yet. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. I'm so excited to have this conversation. So we have Adam Met. For those of you who know Adam, you might know him from the stage, right? He is the A in the band AJR, and multi-platinum albums, awards, the Earth Awards for Time, Changemaker for the New York Times. I mean, the list is endless. But he's also a massive nerd. He has a PhD in policy, and we're going to get into all of that.
Let's do it.
And this is like a lot, actually, of nerdness going on this stage, because we have also Will Brinkerhoff. Did I say your last name?
Brinkerhoff.
Brinkerhoff.
You're so close. Yeah.
And he is also a second-year PhD. He's an agroecologist, and similarly to Adam, has a million other hats that he's wearing. He's a chef. He is a farmer. And we're going to talk all about the work that you're doing as well. So let me start with you, Will. Tell us how you got into your research in the first place as an agroecologist at the University of Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for having me, Food Tank. It's great to be here and be on stage with both of you. I've always been a nerd, so it sounds like I'm in a room full of nerds as well, which is very comforting. I went to UC Berkeley to study molecular biology. I was studying frogs and salamanders and just loved that world. But I felt the impact wasn't quite there. And I ended up spending a few months farming in Australia and New Zealand. And I had some really revolutionary experiences with farmers who just showed me soil and said, this is what we're farming. We're here to take care of the land. And if we do that correctly, all the rest will follow. Our produce will be delicious and we'll feed our communities well. And on the topic of food as medicine, I was also learning that farming can be medicine. And these people who have those livelihoods and who are in touch with the land also feel very healthy. So I came back to UC Berkeley, and I had, before that, sort of sworn off this frog science because it didn't feel impactful enough. And suddenly I was in food, and I felt like everyone eats and everyone needs to know more about where their food comes from. So now I study crop livestock integration and just ways that we can recycle nutrients on croplands and try and reduce our environmental footprint, but also improve rural livelihood. So like making sure that research is grounded in what farmers want and how they're living in the world.
Yes, and food is a way to bring everyone into the bigger climate conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And so music is a way to do that too. Like that transition, see how I did that?
It was well done.
And so Adam's done that with his massive platform. And he is lesser known for this, but increasingly becoming, this organization is getting so much bigger. And it's called Planet Reimagined. And that's really where your passion and focus is currently. So tell us about that, and tell us how you've used music to bring, introduce audiences to this bigger climate change issue.
Absolutely. So Planet Reimagined really is my day job. My night job is I'll play in front of people. But Planet Reimagined was born with the idea that so much research is done and it sits on a shelf. Whether it's at a university or a think tank, there's very rarely a path towards implementation. So we wanted to build an organization that really thought about the research with an eye towards how can we make it useful as quickly as possible. So we do this in projects across the political spectrum and across the climate space, from waste and energy to advocacy and movement building to AI. And one of the projects that I'm most excited about and is growing fastest is this project that we've incubated called Amplify. And it also happens to be the name of my book because I stole it from Planet Reimagined. But this project, we did a massive study with Ticketmaster to try and understand how fans want to participate in advocacy at concerts and sports events. So in the US last year, Ticketmaster sold 250 million tickets. That's where people are meeting in person. Concerts, sports, fairs, festivals, that's where that energy is happening. And so we built this model to do real civic and political advocacy at concerts and sports events. And I'm not talking about getting people pledging to change the kind of straw that they're using. It's not about that. It's about real concrete action. We've had people registering to vote at our tour last year. We had people phone banking on site from their seats in the arena, asking local politicians to vote a certain way. We just installed this strategy on the Billie Eilish tour in the UK. And one of the things that the fans were advocating for was the Climate and Nature Bill, which has just gotten some really massive support. Hasn't passed yet, but has gotten some really massive support and has a lot of robust policy in there for soil health and for farming. And one of the reasons why we did that is because when we do these programs, and we're working with other artists too, we're starting to work with Lorde and Renee Rapp, and this week we're doing a couple of Tyler Childers shows to kind of reach a different audience because he's a country artist, if you're not familiar. But Billie in particular is really passionate about food. So we wanted to find strategies for her fans to engage around something that the artist was passionate about, but also engaging in a really concrete policy fashion, right? Because sure, an artist can post on social media saying, I care about climate change. That's not going to do anything. You can have, you know, a concert in Central Park where people take an action and people show up and do something, but then what happens after, right? You've built all of this excitement and this advocacy, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So this strategy that we built creates long-term advocacy and long-term activists by having people volunteer and then show up to a second location, whether it's community board meetings, volunteering for nonprofits. The whole win here for us in the climate space is how can we grow this movement to be a lot bigger than it is? And we can talk about that more later.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Let's clap for that. That's amazing. So yes, day job versus night job. Amazing. You happen to moonlight on stage.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. Well, let's get into why any of this even matters, right?
Sure.
So the bigger picture here is that we are in a climate crisis, right? This is not news to anyone who's in this audience, but those that are tuning in may not be directly affected by it. So it's important to make these impacts tangible so that we can act on it and bring the urgency to the solutions that we need to scale, right? And so talk to us about the truth, like the hard talk. What's happening with soil? What is the crisis we're experiencing with soil, and what is that going to mean for food systems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the environment around farms is being degraded really quickly. So there's an issue on soil generally with erosion, with soil carbon going off into the atmosphere and not being sequestered. There's also tons of watershed issues. There's Lake Erie. I live in Michigan, and Lake Erie is near me, which is extremely polluted due to nutrients running off of farms. We have solutions through science, regenerative agricultural solutions that can help lessen the environmental impacts of farming and really create a sustainable food system. And my work, it feels like, is trying to sort of re-emphasize that these solutions are they have a lot of merit. We've it's tried and true. But what we do need is more funding to actually pay farmers to do them. So the real problem is that these practices, they don't just come out of thin air. So you can do things like cover cropping or reducing your tillage on farms, which have environmental benefits and also benefits for farmers, but you need to pay farmers more to do those practices because they take more work.
Sure. And so, okay, this is the actual research and that's informing the solutions. We also need policy to support all of this, right? And Adam, this is something, again, a little bit lesser known about the work that you do on the Hill, but incredibly important, really technical, really detailed. But talk to us about the act that's in potentially making its way through Congress right now and why it's so critical to get policies, some of these like very dry technical policies, established as laws.
Yeah. Policy is something that I kind of fell into. When I was doing my PhD is in human rights law and sustainable development. And so when the Inflation Reduction Act was being negotiated, I worked with a bunch of different members of Congress on the indigenous-owned energy provisions. And that was kind of my first foray into talking to Republicans and Democrats. And for me, effective policy is just as much about the policy itself and the implementation of it as the language we're using when talking to the different people on the different sides of the political spectrum. We have a bill right now that we've been working on for a while that encourages the siting of renewable energy on top of current oil and gas land, right? A very simple solution, has never been done before in the United States. There's about 18 million viable acres where we can put wind or solar on top of oil and gas land. And one of the reasons why it didn't happen so far was because in the Department of Interior, the permitting office for one is on a different floor from the permitting office of another. And that's the kind of shit that really bothers me. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse here. But,
that's really like an episode of Veep, isn't it?
It really is an episode of Veep. It's crazy. But because of the language change that we did as we were working with Republicans and working with Democrats, yes, this might be unpopular in this room, but we engaged directly with small oil and gas companies in order to understand what they needed in order to transition their businesses, to provide them a new lease on life, literally. In the Intermountain West, where a lot of this land is, a lot of the social services are funded by oil and gas, the revenues that come from oil and gas. Schools, hospitals, a lot of that revenue is coming from oil and gas. So we wanted to make sure that we were working directly with the communities. We now have a bill that has been introduced in the Senate that has equal numbers of Republican and Democrat support to create incentives to put renewables on top of oil and gas land. And we have a House version that is coming soon as well, which for me is mind-blowing that in this current environment that we were able to get Republicans and Democrats together, but that really comes down to the language.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And that's the hard, grueling work ultimately, right? We need to see more policies like that make their way under the radar, which is acceptable, but ultimately benefiting, citizens. And how are we going to protect America's food future from your vantage point, right? So we're securing energy. We need to secure our food systems, and soil is where it all, stems from. So how do you, if everything goes according, let's say everything works out with what the solutions that you hope to see happen, will we be able to actually harvest food and have security in the United States in the future?
Well, I think, honestly, it harks right back to what you were just saying. I think there's an urban-rural divide that we have in the United States that makes all of these solutions really tricky. And I think the first barrier is just changing our language. I was at the food tank panel here on Tuesday called Keeping Farmers on the Land. It was incredible. There was a lot of farmers here talking. And one phrase that I heard talked about a lot was common sense agriculture. Instead of using jargony words, which in my PhD I'm getting quite familiar with, let's talk about what is common sense agriculture? If you have a series of droughts that are coming your way, you are going to change your practices in order to accommodate those droughts. And what those practices are, those are regenerative, and they're sustainable, and they're the food future. But I think changing our verbiage a little bit to include both urban and rural communities and people across the political spectrum, it's the only way that we're going to move forward.
Bringing everyone along for the solutions, right? Just acknowledging that this is relevant to every person. It doesn't matter what political identity or whatever identity is being led with. That's irrelevant. The reality is that everybody can join and be part of the solution. And so you like to do that through cooking as well, right? So you identify as a chef. Talk to us a little bit about what the reason for that, bringing people together and using food as a mechanism for really raising awareness around what's happening and where the food is coming from.
Totally. Yeah, well, so during my years at UC Berkeley, I had a summer where I was working in a lab, just doing lab work, and I had an extra 20 hours a week that I was just spending reading a lot. And someone recommended to me that I should go to the kitchen of Chez Panisse and meet Alice Waters and ask her for an internship. And so I did that. And I started working in the kitchen of Chez Panisse, which is a really beautiful, famous farm-to-table restaurant in California. And through working there and meeting farmers who were dropping off their produce every day and being joyful about it, not only in the eating, because as you can imagine, it's quite easy to be joyful eating at Chez Panisse, but also the farmers who are doing the hardest work there are showing up with a smile on their faces. That was so inspiring to me. And so I think my academic work, in the long run, we can change policy and do things that Adam's talking about. And in the short run, I really wanted impact that I could just see happening right in front of my eyes. So being able to support my friends and family by cooking, I do farm-to-table dinners all over Michigan, all over the country, and being able to really highlight the work of these farmers the same day that they probably harvested the produce is super, super important to me.
What was that? Was that an invite to dinner?
We'll talk.
That's what I heard. So, Adam, you get this, obviously. You've traveled all over the country touring, and then you've been able to conduct research at your concerts and talk to individuals about what they care about and really understand that this really there isn't the divide that we perceive necessarily on the ground. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's funny because the divide that is perceived broadly in this country and around the world really is coming from us and our side. And that might not be an easy thing to hear, but the language, to go back to the point of language, the language that we're using, the language of climate change, of 1.5 degrees, of sustainability, even something like regenerative, that is not resonating with people. I spent a lot of time on the Harris campaign last year, and they sent me to different college campuses, and I did door knocking in all of these different neighborhoods. Not once did I talk about climate change. And if I slipped it in here or there, you just saw people's eyes glaze over. It's really far away. It's really distant. 1.5 degrees means nothing to them. So one of the things that we did at Planet Reimagined over the last handful of, and by the way, this is not just in response to the Trump administration saying that we can't use this language anymore. This has been really since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. People didn't really see how it could impact their day-to-day lives. They didn't see the benefit of it. So one of the things that we did at Planet Reimagined over the last handful of months is we built this new approach to a third generation of what the climate movement should look like without using any of those words. So I think some people have passed these out, but you might have them in your hand. We call it the neo-industrial revolution. And really, it is a brand new lexicon that we did a lot of research on, worked with a whole bunch of different partners to develop, focusing on what we're doing in this room about how we grow things, how we make things, how we get from place to place, how we power our homes and our institutions. And that is the thing that people care about because they see how it relates to their day-to-day lives. People, to harken back to the earlier panel, people care about jobs, people care about the economics, they care about, there's this mother I met actually in Detroit. She cared about how she was going to get her kids to and from school and how she was going to afford to put food on her kids' plate. That was what she cared about, and that is not climate change to her. But we know that that's climate change. In this room, we can keep using those words, fine. But as we're trying to grow the movement, we need to use this other lexicon. The other piece of this neo-industrial revolution is something that I'm sure you've seen in school, and I'm sure you've seen across all of the people that you work with and talk to, is that we need to move away from individual action and towards collective action, and that's far easier said than done. So in this declaration that we handed out, there is sector by sector how we can do this really quickly and really efficiently. One of the things that I find most interesting is that universities in particular are so siloed They're running towards these things at the same time. They're running towards solutions around climate at the same time. But what's happening in the political science department is not at all talking to what's happening in the food sciences department, which is not at all what's happening in, they're not talking to the environmental sciences department. They're all very different. They're all completely siloed. So in universities, there is a deep need to do more research collaboratively and with an eye towards how can we make it useful really quickly. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing research for research's sake. That's absolutely vital. But in a crisis like this one, we need to be pointing towards the solutions as quickly as possible. The other thing that's in this declaration that we developed is this idea of re-research, right? I don't know if you've heard of this before because we developed it. But re-research is this idea that over the last 20, 30, 40 years, so much research has been done, and like I said at the beginning, it sits on a shelf. There's so much opportunity to go back and look at what has already been done and see if it can be applied again now. There's solutions everywhere at universities across the US and across the world that can actually be implemented really quickly. So this is what we built, this neo-industrial revolution. It doesn't have all the answers. It's not, you feel it's like very short. It doesn't have all the answers. But it really is a philosophy, because when we were in the science-based era of the movement, that was amazing because it really gave a grounding to the movement. With Greta and the Green New Deal, really focused on policy. But now we're in an era of the movement that needs to engage a broader number of people, widen the political spectrum. And to do that, we need to change the way we are engaging people and the way we are talking about this movement.
Okay. Please share the manifesto.
Please share. Yes, thank you.
We're in the last few minutes. This time flies with you guys always. So
Crazy.
let's talk about the future. And are we going to solve it? We are in a bubble. We work with the amazing people, and everybody's so passionate and motivated. And you feel optimistic. But the reality is that there's pressing challenges, and we are the solutions really commensurating with the immensity of the challenges. So do you have hope that we're going to solve all of this? Can we scale regenerative agriculture fast enough?
Yeah, I have a lot of hope, and I just have to reiterate these points about reaching across the aisle, having hard conversations. I think, especially with young people, I see us shying away from the hard Thanksgiving table conversation. I don't want to go to Thanksgiving because I don't want to talk to my uncle. And I think we have to double down on that and actually sit and have the hard conversation and use new vocabulary to push it forward. And I also just have to say, in every talk that I give, I just say that farmers are doing this work that I'm talking about. Like, I'm here to push the research that I'm doing, but every single day there's people across the country, across the world, who are working to make that change happen. And those people often can't be in this room because they are actually farming the food that we eat. And so that's also just an important baseline that we all have to have.
And one more point on that, we need more farmers too, right?
Yes.
We need to get the next generation excited about going into farming.
Mm-hmm.
As a young farmer, how do you motivate?
Totally. I mean, I think coming back to the land is a natural inclination that many people have. And I think, a lot of that is policy intervention, like having systems that can support small farmers. The cost of land is rising, and the average age of farmers in every state is rising. And so trying to find interventions where we can support young farmers who have these inclinations to grow food sustainably but need support to do it, that is vital for the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Will. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. And yes, please, we can clap for Will. Adam, last few seconds, all yours. Let's get everyone excited and out there.
Oh boy. Guys, we're really doing a terrible job. I'm not kidding.
Should have ended on Will.
You really should have ended with Will. This was your fault, Shata. We're really doing a terrible job, but that doesn't mean we have to keep doing a terrible job. And everyone in this room and everyone that I've met across Climate Week is so focused on the thing that they're doing, which I love, right? That's why I spent years doing a PhD, because I was so focused on the one thing that I loved. But as we're focusing on the one thing that we love, we need to be creating more of this collaboration. We need to be talking to people across sectors. We need to be talking to people who really disagree with us. I want to echo what Will said, because this political spectrum thing is something that shouldn't exist in the world of climate, and it doesn't need to exist in the world of climate. Farming happens in red states and blue states, probably more red states than blue states, but it really is something that we can all agree on, because like he said, everyone gets together to sit down to enjoy a meal. And while in the last handful of months, I've heard a lot of people who are really depressed about the future and really angry about what they think the future might bring, local is going to win. In the next handful of years, local is going to win on the policy side, local is going to win on the movement building side, local is going to win on the farming side. It is really vital that we focus on local. And I'll end with one really quick story because I know we're over time. People voting in local elections is something that they don't understand, that it's necessary. There was a community board race in Texas that was won by 12 votes, literally 12 votes. At that level, the decisions are made about transportation, about farming, about electricity, about waste. That's where the decisions are made that are of that impact your day-to-day life. So whenever anyone comes up to you and says, what is I want to get involved, what is the thing I could do? The number one thing people could do is literally Google or ChatGPT when their next local election is and bring 5 other people to go vote in that local election. They happen hundreds of times throughout the year. It's not just in November, but for the next handful of years and around the world, local is going to win.
Adam, please never give up your day job. We really appreciate the work that you do. Okay, thank you so much to my panelists. And
thank you,
Denny, for...
Thank you.
Thank you, Shata.
Yeah, thanks, Food Tank.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Adam. Another round of applause. That was great. And Adam's words couldn't be more true. We have to start listening to the people who don't necessarily agree with us. And I think listening is the best thing we can do as humans. So you got that copy of the Neo-Industrial Revolution. If you didn't get one, there are some outside the door. A few lucky people will also receive a bonus gift copy of Adam's book, Amplify: How to Use the Power of Connection to Engage, Take Action, and Build a Better World. Under some of your seats, there's a fruit or vegetable sticker. I'll give you a moment to take a look right now, and then you can hold it up, and somebody will give you, somebody from the Food Tank team will give you the book. And it's signed. Did you get it? Yay. Yep, that's it. Anyone else? There's one over here, Kenzie. Kenzie, over there. All right. Now we have to get serious again, everyone. Settle down. Everyone, settle down. You've got your books. You're good. You get a lot of free stuff at Food Tank events. Calm down. All right, so I'm very excited for this next conversation. We're going to take a look at the lessons we can learn about building nourished, climate-resilient communities. I have the best panelists. I mean, no offense to the others, but I have the best panelists. Kate McKenzie is the Executive Director at the Mayor's Office of Food Policy here in New York City. Give her a huge round of applause. We have Isabella Kamariza, who is the founder and president of Solid Africa in Rwanda. Welcome her. Maximo Torero is the chief economist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and my hero. Welcome him. And we have Anna Lappe, who is the executive director at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, and I've known her a long, long time. Thank you all for being here. And so, Maximo, as always, I'm going to start with you. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has a roadmap outlining strategies to end hunger while keeping global warming under 1.5 degrees. Can you talk about why it's important for us as a global community to have this roadmap?
No, thank you. I think the simple way of putting it is good food for all for today and tomorrow. Normally we worry a lot about the today, but we forget about the tomorrow. So what this roadmap tries to do is tries to bring two objectives at the same time. Achieving zero hunger, which is what we all want, with good food. We don't say healthy diets because it's the more complex layer, but at the same time being sustainable, so assuring that we don't trespass the 1.5 degrees. So that's the whole goal. And the other thing, which is complex, is trying to combine actions at the country level or at the subnational level, so that they in aggregate will allow us to achieve this global problem, which is a global problem, which is climate. So that one country does one thing doesn't mean that the problem will be resolved. We are not in a beautiful, perfect competitive model that whatever everybody does aggregates to the beautiful thing. So we need to coordinate that process so that the actions of the countries take into account this impact at the coordination level. So that's a little bit what we are trying to do, and that's the aim. So good food for all for today and tomorrow.
Thank you. And Kate, this roadmap, you know, it's a global roadmap, and you're trying to really translate it locally here in New York City.
Yes. I must confess. I'm going to try and do this. I want every day to start in the way that today started, with a Broadway singer, maybe singing Britney Spears, but I must confess that having a global roadmap like what the UN has done for us has really enabled us to bring a city like New York into to find our way, right? So with the domains like enabling healthy diets for all, like clean energy, like food loss and waste, we've been able to look at a strategy that we've not released this week, but will be soon, a food and climate strategy with 3 goals, including our own mitigating climate and environmental impacts of food consumed by New Yorkers, reducing food waste and diverting all of New York's food to away from landfills, and adapting New York City's food system to be resilient from shocks and disruptions from climate change. So my loneliness is not killing me because
I love you so much.
These are what my notes are for.
It's the best line of this.
So because we are able to find partners in other parts of the United States, but also in other parts of the world, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the global south or in Asia, who are also, maybe it's through school meal programs, or maybe it's through finding relationships and new ways to work with farmers. I loved what Mariana was, I mean, some of our, like, our hardest work is through procurement challenges, right? And the not sexy work of finding the legal pathways to find expressions of values-based procurement. So, you know, there's no one size fits all here. So it's through frameworks like that. And I still believe that there are ways that we can find even more success. Because to be clear, we have not cracked the code. We have miles and miles to go before we have even got on the right path to success. And I just love the opportunity again to learn from the pathways and frameworks that the roadmap has set us on, and will continue to grow from our partners here and beyond. So thank you.
Round of applause for Kate. Bringing it all together. I'm going to stick with you for one moment because we are here to talk about school meals and what's being done at the school level to connect kids with food that's healthy and sustainable and encourage them to know where it comes from. Can you talk about that work here in New York?
So again, the behind the scenes work around the procurement change is exhausting and rewarding at the same time. And many people know, because I talk about my kids all the time in this, but I see Nancy here too. It's the work of actually taking the products of that procurement, the new kinds of fruits and vegetables, and translating those into recipes, right? Emily from the Rockefeller Foundation and I were talking last night. Her kids are now not going to be are also eating those meals. You know, it's about deliciousness. It's about making sure that what we're feeding our kids is delicious, right? And, pulling out from earlier conversations, I think every panel, hopefully all week, all the time, is talking about cultural sensitivity and inclusivity. So we're trying to make sure that it's not just getting regenerative meals, farm fresh meals, but making sure that how we're cooking those, that we're training our food service workers in all aspects. Yes, about in schools, but also in hospitals, in correction systems, but making sure that we're giving people the skills to cook differently, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's not just saying like, here, do something with this,
Right.
but giving people the skills and the opportunities to be able to do that,
Yeah.
right? So it's recipes, it's training, it's appreciation and gratitude for the people that not just grow the food, but also prepare those meals.
Right.
So it's, you know, it's all the different things to be able to put the meals on the plate.
Yeah.
But then also, you know, I think there's a huge theme this week too around food loss and waste.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's not delicious, it's going to be thrown away.
Right.
So we've got to make sure that we're responding to that so that all of the fruits of all of our labor are not just thrown away and are consumed by kids because they're really picky.
Yeah.
Right? And so
Yeah.
we've got to make sure that they're tasting it, they're giving feedback, and ultimately we're taking that in and adapting and innovating and you know, keep on to
Yeah.
make sure that we're constantly evolving what we're doing.
Yeah, the school food revolution has to be delicious or it won't work.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Yes.
Isabel, if we can shift gears a little bit and let me turn to you. Your organization is connecting hospital patients and public school students with healthy meals. Can you talk about why these institutions are so important to small scale and medium scale farmers in Rwanda?
Yes, thank you. I think they're important because they drive the demand.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about public institutions, that's where most of the meal are produced.
Mm-hmm.
In Rwanda, the government fund a school meal program where they feed more than 4 million kids every day.
Wow.
And in public hospital, Solid Africa is providing medically tailored meals to more than 100,000 patients.
Wow.
In partnership also with the Ministry of Health in terms of infrastructure and some co-payments. But really what drives the smallholder farmers is not the numbers of meals,
Right.
or the numbers of students, of patients. What drives the smallholder farmers to actually get out of poverty is the fact that you shift the way they've been practicing farming. It's for them to test their soil, know the state of their soil, know which fertilizer to put, have the right crops at the right time. Is to invest in them, not only to move from poverty, not only to move from few dollars, but how can they grow their family to come from low income to middle income. But more than that, for smallholder farmers, if you are feeding people at scale, let's do it in a way that is diversified.
Yep.
You can drive an economy by just planting beans and maize.
Right.
You understand? Because at the end of the day, your soil needs to be regenerative.
Right,
They need to know
right.
carrot. They need to have Bezos vitamin. They need all of that. I think I'm in a room where I don't have to explain that. So if I really am moving to my point, is that if you are taking on that theory that we have to link regenerative school meals, hospital meals that are daily medically tailored meals, then at the end of the game, those meals have to be, it has to be a plate that is full of health, full of taste, but most importantly, that is full of dignity. Because when we talk about diversity, is how do we feed people? And for me, I think that's what would drive the farmers to eat better themselves.
Right.
And to have more money in diversifying the portfolio of the crops that they are growing.
Absolutely. I love this, a plate of dignity and so many other things, but it really gives farmers an opportunity that they otherwise would not have had to supply to schools, to supply to hospitals.
Like for us, if I go into numbers, we work with around 6,000 farmers. In just 2 seasons, we've shifted the way that they are farming because of one thing. We are the market. We work with them, we train the trainers, we work with other organizations on the ground, and we teach them regenerative agriculture. Just in 2 seasons, they have increased their production by 40%.
Wow.
They have increased their income by 60%.
Nice.
And our aim is not to end there. It's not to say, now you are 60%, let's move to the other cooperative.
Right.
How can you move your income to 200%, to 300%? Because I feel that sometimes we are just checking dots of removing people from poverty from $20 to $30, and then we clap ourselves and we say, okay, we've moved. That's not how we work.
Sure.
The smallholder farmers, not just in Africa, in all our continent, our countries, in America, they are the ones who hold our education, our health,
Right.
our lives. So we shouldn't be happy because they moved from one category to the another.
Yeah.
We should be happy that they're transforming and that they're having the money that equals to the investment they're putting in this world.
Yeah.
And it's true for teachers and other people.
Absolutely. And Isabel, the impact of that is intergenerational because those farmers are teaching their kids that agriculture can be this tremendous opportunity later on because they can make money and they can eat better and do all these things. And if I can turn to you, I think there's still this sort of rampant misconception. It's been a long 4 days. There's a rampant misconception that a transition away from industrial or conventional practices, whatever you want to call them, to more regenerative practices is not going to be able to feed the world. You and you know, so many people like you have been trying to dispel that myth for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, thanks, Danny. And I'll see if I can put a sentence together after a couple days of Climate Week. But I think this panel to me is the embodiment, and I see many of you who I know here in the room, and is the embodiment of the story of actually how regenerative agriculture can, and in fact is necessary to bring the kind of diverse diets and healthy diets that we know are so vital to our health. I mean, I'm thinking about the work of the UNFAO, the roadmap you've given us, but also the work that the FAO did in recent years to really map the true cost of our current food system.
Right.
And I don't know how many of you saw the top line note, but our current food system is costing us $10 to $12 trillion. Largely from healthcare costs, but also from all kinds of other environmental costs. And so one of the key messages that so many of us are trying to get out there is that this transition to more regenerative agriculture, to the kinds of school meals that you're innovating in Rwanda, the kinds of work you're doing in New York City, that this kind of transition, yes, there will be some costs. We heard it on the earlier panel. Yes, to help farmers transition, there's going to be some costs. To build back those from-scratch kitchens in schools is going to cost us something. The kind of education programs that we need will cost us something. But we shouldn't really conceptualize that as a cost, because actually that is paying back itself in dividends over and over again. We're seeing it in the state of California, where I sat on the Farm to School Commission several years ago, and the state of California has committed from just 2020 to 2022, $100 million into school meals for regenerative, healthy, diverse school meals, and has been tracking the incredible benefit from that investment. Yeah. We're seeing it in terms of better attention in schools. We're hearing it from teachers. We're hearing it in terms of farmers seeing their incomes going up and seeing that encouragement of being more regenerative and being more successful on the farm. We're seeing it in terms of the benefits for workers. These are workers who are being trained to be higher skilled and from scratch cooking. So that, to me, is one of the key messages that we all can be amplifying, that not to think of this transition as a burden or a cost, but to think about this as an investment and one that, again, will pay over and over again. And I feel like the stories we already heard earlier today and just now really echo that.
Yeah, the benefits far outweigh those initial costs because you're going to get that money back later on anyway.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Maximo, this is something you think about a lot, true cost accounting.
No, but let me put it this way. So let's assume that you don't have electricity and the lights go off and everything is dark here. So that's how we are making decisions in most of the world. We don't have the information. We don't know what is the true cost of things. And we basically decide on choices, thinking on today, and we don't take into account the tomorrow. Ministers of Finance have to make decisions for today. Normally, they believe their jobs are for 3 months or a year, depending on the government. In my country, they rotate very fast. But they make decisions for today. It's very strange to find a government that is trying to make decisions also for tomorrow, because politically it won't pay them back. It will pay back to the next one. And that's where the institutionality and bringing evidence is so important. So we need to bring some light into what we are trying to do. And it's not easy because many people try to do things in different ways. So true cost accounting, the real cost of food, and so on and so forth, there are many labels attached to it. And everyone was using a different methodology. So then you don't know what is really happening. Again, you create more darkness in the already dark room. So the job that we were trying to do in FAO was trying to standardize that and to at least, it could be that we are not perfect. It could be that our methodology is not the best one, but at least everybody knows what it is and everybody knows the difference between the different locations with the same methodology. I think that helps a lot to bring some light to the room and will help governments to make decisions. And this is not necessarily to increase the price of food. Nobody's saying that through cost accounting and understanding the real cost of the water, the real cost of my soils, the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases that food could create, should be in the price, but at least could help me to prioritize my investments, could help me to prioritize what I will subsidize if I have to subsidize for a period of time or not. Today, we just subsidize for subsidizing. And that's the problem. We are subsidizing the incorrect crops also, the crops that not necessarily will create the biggest nutrition return. So that's a little bit the logic of what we're trying to do with these things, and the same with the roadmap, because it helps us a lot to open lights in the roadmap, where the roadmap should move so that we are very efficient, because we want farmers to make resources. We want farmers to grow. We want farmers to be as good as possible. We don't want farmers to stay small and in subsistence level. That doesn't make any sense. We want them to keep growing. And we want also for governments to understand that what is done today has a consequence tomorrow, and that consequence needs to be taken into account in any political decision they do. And the evidence helps for that, and the peer pressure helps for that. So we are very happy that the municipalities, the private sector are taking this roadmap so seriously, because really it could create a movement, despite all the opposition we have around and all the pressures internally and externally. It will help us a lot to at least start to create some directions of where we need to move from bottom up so that we can aggregate and achieve the goal that we want at aggregate level.
Absolutely, so common sense. I wish all governments and all institutions like FAO were working to shine a light on things that are true. Anna, Isabel, and Kate, I want to ask you, we're seeing a lot of withdrawal of both international aid for food programs and also federal aid for food programs. How worried are the three of you, and Maximo, you can jump in as well, how worried are you about the long-term impact of these withdrawals, Anna?
Yeah, well, I was just talking to a colleague who works on food security in the state of Iowa, just one state in our large country, and he is estimating that just the state of Iowa has lost $10 billion over the next 10 years in funding for food security, food programs in just that one state. So I think that you were asking kind of the globe and how this is touching down here. So I think we are all very alarmed at the rollback in the public sector, and it's sort of what it should be doing. It's shared responsibility to help us all live healthy lives. So I think one of the things that would be so important for all of us is to continue to put that pressure on the public sector to really ensure that those food security programs are funded. And globally, one of the things that we're hearing, so I run a strategic alliance of philanthropic foundations. We have about 30 members, including some who are in the room. And one of the things that we're looking at from philanthropy is how can philanthropy catalyze that kind of public sector funding? And then how can we support the local actors and communities that are seeing the rollback in, say, food aid, but seeing it as an opportunity to try to build back local food sovereignty, local food systems, not sugarcoating the kind of absolute impact of the disruption, but also trying to see it as an opportunity to build up local infrastructure and local food economies. So we're living in very much a both and moment. This is such a crisis. I don't know how many of you tuned into Farm Aid. It was its 40th anniversary. We heard from U.S. farmers. There is a farm crisis in this country, worse than the 1980s.
Right.
And at the same time, I have been infused just in the few hours of being in this room with the incredible sense of momentum and opportunity. So it's a both and moment, and to tap into the both and of it is what we need to do.
Such good advice. Thank you for that. Isabel,
Yes.
how has the decrease in international aid sort of affected what you're trying to do in Rwanda?
I think for me, I'm not a typical person that they fund. I think that USAID got stopped. They had made a commitment to fund 25% of their funding to go to locally led, locally leaders. But they were on their way to do that, but at least it hasn't arrived to me or people that I know around.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that their strategy were different. So I don't think I'm in position to talk about what it is to lose them or not. But what I'm in position to talk about is that when you don't receive that kind of aid, that's why we created that roadmap. We created a roadmap without knowing we were creating one. We created a roadmap from our own experience, knowing that if I give you this diet, you will heal better. Before we met food is medicine, before we met all of that.
Right.
And then finally, we arrived to a place where we have the knowledge to match the experience that we have, what we have been producing. So we have a whole circular from the farm to kitchens, to distribution, fertilizer, to culinary and nutrition schools. That's the roadmap that we have.
Yeah.
So that would be my response.
Thank you, Isabel. Kate, the federal funding cuts have had a big impact on people you know.
Yeah. So to be clear, the federal safety net in this program is the lifeline for Americans, right? And in this city, you know, we are like looking down the gauntlet at extraordinary threats and real cuts, right? Specifically to the SNAP program. You know, we are about to start a new federal fiscal year in a few days, and the city is really bracing for extraordinary impact. A bright line here is the fact that the school meals program in particular is not under threat at the moment. You know, our children, this is, you know, essential for everyone. In New York City, roughly 75% of kids come from families that, you know, sometimes don't know where their next meal is going to come from. I think the stat is often, you know, 1 in 4 kids come from families that don't always know where their next meal is going to come from. But 75% of families, 75% of kids in New York City come from like families that are income insecure, right? So we know that they rely on those school meals. It is like, it motivates me every day to make sure that those school meal programs are the absolute best that they can be. Those school breakfast programs, we always struggle to make, when we talk about, we're always thinking about lunch, breakfast is the hardest. Breakfast is the hardest, to make sure that kids go and eat breakfast. It's been free, I mean, all meals are free in New York City, but breakfast has been free for like over 10 years. We need to make sure that kids go get breakfast, right? Everyone should know that, but those are the programs, those are the lifelines to make sure that kids are eating in schools. Test scores are like on the rise in New York. We got to make sure that that continues to happen. So, you know, we're working very closely with something called the City Food Policy Project. It is essential to make sure that we continue to make those lifelines, they are lifelines to our farmers down the line, but also making sure that we continue to just really showcase those opportunities to improve upon the lines of agriculture into our school meal programs. Our food education programs are essential in this city. So we're really doubling down on school meals in New York City in particular, but it is going to be a hard time for families in New York. So I appreciate you asking the question, because I think, you know, for those of you who are tuning in or who are not New Yorkers, you can easily walk around this city this week and think New York's great. It is a really great place. Make no mistake, but there is a lot of suffering in this city.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the absence of federal leadership, this is for all of you, in the absence of federal leadership in the United States, the work that each of you do is more important than ever before. Thank you all so much. I am so proud to know you all. Thank you all so much. Round of applause. Thanks all so much. You can applaud them as they leave. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love you. Sorry, I have to compose myself. Okay, before I introduce our next speaker, I want to thank a few more of our in-kind partners, Acme Smoked Fish, Little Sesame, and Kerry Dairy Ireland, which always trips me up, like I'm Kerry Dairy. Anyway, joining me for this next session, I get to welcome Paul Pullman, a business leader, investor, philanthropist, and the former CEO of Unilever. He is also the co-author of Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. Please give him a round of applause. Hello. Nice to see you. Good.
You guys have been busy.
We have been busy, but short anecdote, Paul Pullman was at the very first food tank event ever here in New York City, and it was on food loss and food waste 1 million years ago. Nice to see you.
Man, you have an amazing memory. And you don't change, I'm getting older.
Oh, I've changed.
But it's, I was just talking to the wonderful lady waiting, coming in, and she was saying 2 years ago you only had one or 2 days, and now you have the whole week. So it shows that things are changing. You know, you should feel good about that. Although there's a lot to do, it seems that we're getting more on the agenda.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, and you've been doing a lot. I want to, before we get into the other things that you do, regenerative school meals have been a really important issue for you, and I want you to tell us about why.
Well, it's very simple, because I think obviously in our own lives we do a lot of things, and one of the things I do is try to get as many kids in school that are blind or deaf-blind, and we have a big foundation in Africa to achieve that. And when COVID came, for example, most of these kids go to school obviously because they have higher ambitions. But one of the reasons they go into schools also is because you're providing school meals, and they just simply don't have that at home. If you just look at the statistics, there are probably, you probably have every session quoting different numbers, but there are probably about 300 million children malnourished in this world. And if you see how many are deprived of school meals, you probably get to 150, 200 million, and for many it's a reason. So you have to fight for that. And with Unilever, when I had the honor to chair that company, we had incredible programs with the World Food Program, probably the biggest ones that were around at that time, to be sure that these kids have school meals. And so it's a human dignity and respect. Everybody has the right to food. So that's probably the most important thing, but it also makes good economic sense. If you develop these communities, you have to start there, and you probably, with the work we've done, for example, in, let me think of an example, or Indonesia or Brazil are probably the better examples now, Kenya, etc. You can see the economic effect could be 2-3% of your economic growth right there. So what I like now about it, I'm on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, which is a big honor. And Rockefeller has made a commitment for 100 million children with school meals or between now and 2030, basically, and put the money behind it to achieve that. But what we are thinking much more is how do you use that to galvanize a broader change in the sorry about that. How do you galvanize a broader change in the food system? And that's, nowadays thinking a little bit broader about systems change is needed to make these lasting changes that we haven't been able to make. I mean, as long as I live, people talk about how broken our food system is. 800 million people going to bed hungry, not knowing if they wake up, 160 million people stunted, 30-40% of food being wasted, land being degraded, forests being cut, obesity on the other side. I mean, if you come from Mars, you certainly wouldn't call us the most intelligent species. But and yet we have not been able to fix it, despite all the attention. We're hardly spending money on it. It's one of the most underfunded areas, school meals included, obviously, but even if you see the money that goes to food, we might get a little bit more awareness now. If you look at Climate Week here, you looked at London Climate Week, you look at now what we're doing for the COP, and, food is really on the agenda now. Yeah. And people are starting to understand that you can't solve climate change if you don't change the food system, for example. 30% of the problem, 30% of the solution, a 60% swing. And guess what? With a relatively low amount of investment and a fast result. And as we struggle in the other areas, this is an area that you tend to get more alignment irrespective of the political colors that you have. And you can drive more in the middle instead of being sidetracked by the two gutters of the left and the right. So I think that is, it's becoming actually not only more urgent, sadly, but it's also more in our reach to do something about it. Sorry, long answer.
No, that's great. Definitely more in our reach. What I think about is if school and regenerative school meals especially make, economic sense, they provide dignity, they provide, economic opportunities for farmers, they provide, this opportunity for better nutrition and good tasting food, then why aren't more governments, why aren't more philanthropy organizations getting behind regenerative school meals or school meals in general?
Well, there are. So the world is spending about 80 billion on school meals. The government's procurement on meals, 70% is going to school meals, and over 400 million people are getting school meals. And even in my time in the Netherlands, we had school meals, and these programs still exist in many countries. It's just that in the developing markets, these numbers are again dropping off to in the low 20s. So that's the issue. That is an issue of lack of funding, lack of consistent programs. And when you do it, you could see it in Brazil. There was very good program under the first Lula government, and then Bolsonaro came, gave it less attention. Then you have to restart it again to some extent. But if you do it well, you can see what happens. And so now you have governments like, let's say, Kenya making big commitments, or governments like Indonesia making big commitments. And why isn't it going faster? Because it's darn difficult, especially when it involves many different ministries. You want to do it right. You want to, what is quality food? What is local sourcing? What is regenerative agriculture? How do you take all the middlemen out and the people that have their own interest in current systems? How do you do it without corruption? How do you build capabilities on the ground? So President Prabowo, for example, I've talked to him now several times, and he has great ambitions. He took me to some of the efforts that they're doing in setting up this network to reach about, what did he tell me, 82.9 million people or so. These are big numbers. That's 5 times the population of my country. And, setting up with the nutrition agency, the capabilities, and getting the best practices in, and getting people on the ground being trained. They've had issues with speed of scaling up that affected the quality of the food and the school meals, or, the waste where they deliver the school meals, but already, it's too much or not enough, or getting the farmers or the local cooperatives up and running and getting the middlemen out. This is hard work. And that's why we have to co-own that. We cannot just say, they made a major commitment and spending a lot of money. Right now, probably my guess would be around 4 billion going up to 10 billion to make it really work. But your money has to come from somewhere. So then, he saves on other areas, but the students go in the streets because they feel there's less money for them because it goes to the school meals, et cetera, and the thing goes. So these are complex systems changes that, so we can all sit here and say, snap your fingers because it's so obvious, make it happen. But where the world falls short is, we are not short of people that tell us what to do, we're short of people that are doing. And that's where we need to focus on, to be honest.
I agree. It is such an opportunity, school meals, for silo breaking, and you talked about that a lot. But the return on investment on school meals is huge. Can you talk about that?
Well, you can quote numbers, and anybody has a number because they need to issue reports. But so I have a little problem of that. They say, for example, $1 invested in school meals gives a $30 return. Is a number I saw in Mariana's report. Quickly coming over here, reading it in my Uber, but If it is so obvious, why isn't everybody jumped on it? But the fact is, we all know that. We know that if we feed people properly and avoid stunting and provide people with the right nutrition, we tend to perform better than if we're hungry. So, and it gets back into education, it gets back into the resilience of local communities. Is it 2% of GDP, 3% of GDP, 4%? I don't know. If I listen to all the NGOs and all the problems we need to solve and all the GDPs that we grow, if I add it up, we probably should be growing 60% a year right now. So for me, it's more important, it's the right thing to do. Right. We all need it. And we're better able to perform, and then different regions will have different developments as a result of it. But it certainly is a payout. When I was running Unilever, I was spending about 10 million, and we never advertised that, but we were spending about 10 million on school meals a year, and we were the biggest donors to the World Food Program. I never questioned that. We were a 50 billion company. You have to, you miss the point of why you're here in this world if you can't spend 10 million on what's important. So, were they all going to use our products afterwards because we did Knorr this, or we did, our butter brands there, or whatever it is? I couldn't give a hoot. I only knew that if these communities would be successful, that we had more chances as a company to be successful, and that tends to be true in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing some, please. The momentum is really building. At the first UN Food Systems Summit, we saw the launch of the School Meals Coalition, and that momentum is really important right now at the global level, especially with what we've been talking about before with the disruption of international aid. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so a global coalition against poverty and hunger. Lula sort of champions that on the G20. Everybody sits around the table, says yes, 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 and then they go back home and do other things. So out of that, you get the Global School Meal Alliance. They're at the meeting now in Fortaleza. There are over 100 countries. Again, reconfirming the commitment a few weeks ago. 70, 80 countries were there and different ministries. Obviously, it's a whole of society issue, so you have to be able to put systems in place. We talked about different ministries need to get involved, nearly all of them, and because goal number one is poverty alleviation, goal number two is food security, and that's not surprising, because when we developed the Sustainable Development Goals, it permeates in all these 17 goals. But it also means it's all of our business for all of us. So you're in the Ministry of Forestry, you're Minister of Environment, you're the Minister of Climate, Minister of whatever, Finance, and the list goes on. You probably have directly or indirectly a link to this. So putting that all together is where the challenge is, and coordinating that, because it's that silo approach often, and that's also the challenge in many of the countries where they're implementing it. And often capabilities are missing, and we need to spend time on that to put those things in place. But that coalition is being formed. You have the accelerator, the World Food Program, which is under tremendous strain and under tremendous lack of funds at a time that the world has more disasters, and if you hear the stories and what they do, and it's heartbreaking, and yet we know we need to do it. You cannot, besides all the things that are happening to people in Sudan or in Gaza and in many other places, 6 areas in the world where there's now outright genocide. There's no other word for it. And if you don't have to make a choice which area you're going to work in, or which people you give the 1 meal a day, they're well beyond the ability to give people 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day. So these are tough things that are the realities of today's world. And the world can sit here and say, we need to do this or that, or make these big promises on television. But, we're falling far short at the political level now on what is needed. And one of the things that needs to happen in the COP, not only on climate and come in with your NDCs and make them more ambitious than what you have, but also on the specific areas of the basic necessities for humanity, including food. So this is a moment where, frankly, you see it in New York as well, where society and business, may I say, some of you might disagree with, which is fine with me, but business and in general and society is running well ahead of the governments right now. And that gap, unfortunately, is getting bigger, and that's not helping us, and we can't afford it. So I know that. So then you say, okay, I'm desperate, I'm hopeless, and I'm depressed, and that's okay. Be that for a minute, but then it's not probably giving you the best energy to take action. So then snap out of it and say, what can I do in my circle of influence, and how can I make use of the situation today and drive it, even farther and harder with the people I work with. And I see more coalitions being formed. I see more energy being created. I see more results on the ground as a result of that. And that's anyway how society should function. I'm not saying I'm against governments. Of course, we need governments. But if they fall short, we need to, step up. If they step down, we step up. And I think that's happening. Climate Week in the UK, people said that's the end of London Climate Week, because we had twice as many people in the UK as the year before, and everybody said we won't go here and you won't let us in and all that stuff. But now there are twice as many people in New York as well. There's something happening, we need to recognize that. And that's very good energy. So I think let's build on that energy and show that we can do it. I mean, we don't have many opportunities anymore, but on the other hand, if we can say we just fixed it once and for all, man, that's worth living for.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your advice. It's okay to mourn, but as my mom would say, like you did, snap out of it because we have work to do. So thank you.
Yeah, but it takes courage. It's not that easy, obviously. So, but you know what they. I don't know. I just rattle on here, but you know, yesterday as well. I mean, I was in the UN. I heard the thing, and the whole day people talk about it, and you know. Who cares if an elevator doesn't work or a teleprompter doesn't work or one guy rattles around everything that he doesn't like? I mean, who cares? You know, why not just keep going on what we know how to do and do well and not get sidetracked by that? So it takes a little bit of courage because nothing worse, I think, than just being your life's being dominated by a bully that you don't agree with in the first place. So, you know, no, but it's the, you know. It's just not worse anymore, and yet, sorry about it, we're talking it again. But just snap out of it and move this reactive fearfulness that is crept into all of us into hope and optimism and courage, and that's probably the missing ingredient. If there's one thing that has brought some light on the last 6 months or 9 months is how few leaders we have in society that are stepping up, and silence is not an option here, or hiding behind others is not an option anymore. It's really serious where we find ourselves. So encouraging more people to work together, to speak up is probably, you know, and fight for what is right is probably the most important thing we can do right now.
Absolutely. That's a great call to action. I guess my last question for you is, we're a month and a half or so before COP. What do you know, this is called the implementation COP. We have to, you know, do things at this COP, not just talk about them. What do you want to see happen?
Well, real things, and I think, you know, multilateralism is not anymore what it used to be, and you can't get agreements with all the countries now. We couldn't get it on plastics. We couldn't get it on, frankly, on the oceans. We had a good agreement that we got more than 60 countries to sign it, but you don't get many more. You know, and financing is difficult for these things. So at the multilateral level, we don't. But I was at the WTO last week because I'm advising Ngozi. You know, trade is doing very well everywhere outside of the U.S. and it's becoming stronger, and the settlement procedures work. And let's just focus on the people who want to do things and do more with those people, and not get sidetracked. Then you might say, yeah, but we need a country of this size. Of course we need a country of this size. But there are many things we can do. This country is also aware that they need to do adaptation, that they need to do resilience building, that they need to build new grids, that, you know, that green energy is cheaper. I mean, they can talk what they want, but 95% of the energy that has been installed in this country in the last 10 years is green energy. They can shout, drill, baby, drill, but nothing is being drilled right now because it doesn't make economic sense. You know, they can say keep the coal plants open, but the owners are screaming because it costs them $1 million a week to keep it open. So are we going to be worried about that and letting our lives be dominated? Or are we going to work with the states or the cities or the projects that are increasingly coming up that are incredibly exciting and see if we can scale them faster? So let's do that. Let's pull ourselves up, not drag ourselves down. And Berlin has to be like that. There are a few objectives that need to be there. Countries are a little bit slow out of the starting blocks with their NDCs. We only have about 30, which is kind of amazing still. But you know, if we can get some big wins in Brazil on food, which I think is possible.
Yeah.
Momentum is really building on regenerative agriculture. Commitments are going up. I think we are getting closer to a tipping point than we give ourselves credit for. And also partly with technology, you know, as you know, there are things happening at a speed that perhaps very soon we can obsolete these herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers that have been one of the causes of now exceeding 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. You know, I've seen some incredible ideas floating around here. So Berlin has to be about that and has to be about tangible and delivering those. The one thing that we need to see if we can get this Tropical Forest Forever Fund going, and you know, it needs 25 billion of commitments, 100 billion of private money is not going to be easy, but you know, Brazil was courageous. They did a lot of thinking on how to set it up. They pledged $1 billion themselves, so we need to give it a chance, because if we can find a mechanism of providing livelihoods for people and and paying for standing forest and protecting this 1 billion hectares, more or less. Doing that with a fund that can generate 4 billion a year in a very smart way on a continuous basis. Make sure that 20% of that money goes to indigenous peoples, which have the knowledge and obviously the stewards of that land. So I think it's very exciting, and if we can make that happen, then we can also change our food systems and get a multiplier effect. You know, you look at Indonesia now. It's a country that needs to import food. It's not a good thing if you need to import food. A country of that size should be independent. So then they cut down forests to get more food estates. So, you know, then we say, no, you have 10, 12 million acres of degraded land. Why don't you use that first? But it's all painful to do that. But if we can get an incentive, financial incentive, where they actually get rewarded and can use that money to provide alternative livelihoods, which there are plenty of opportunities there, then we can change real systems. And I think people are finally, at least in my little life and little exposure that I have to this wonderful world, I think people are finally starting to understand that and see the benefits of that. And that's a sweet spot I like to operate in, and certainly keeps me alive, hopefully, for a long time to come.
I hope so. Thank you, Paul Pullman. Let's pull ourselves up, not down. Give it up for Paul Pullman. Thank you. Thank you so much. What a great way to end this day. Before we do end it, I'd like to invite Sarah Farley back from the Rockefeller Foundation to reflect on what we've heard. Give her a round of applause.
Whoa.
Wow.
Whiplash.
That was amazing. Yes, yes, yes. I wish we went out with a song. And my reflections will not be punctuated with Britney Spears lyrics.
Gosh.
The way the brilliant Kate McKenzie was able to layer in.
That was everything.
That was everything, yes.
What did you think?
It was awesome. And yes, just first to Food Tank, you guys put on one heck of a show. They're a 4-person team. They're a 4-person team, and they curated 386 speakers on this stage over 5 days.
Bernie Pollock.
Bernie Pollock. I mean, there was so much. I took copious notes throughout. I think there's a beautiful integrative storyline that came through. You know, we started with Jen Burney, and she really told us so clearly, school meal programs are the world's largest safety net, right? But they're at risk. We are losing meals today, and we're gonna be losing more meals tomorrow, because every food growing region in the world is experiencing these extreme effects from frost and fire and flood and drought and precipitation changes, and on it goes. So what we're really talking about here for the last 4 hours is how we future-proof our food system with an eye toward our most vulnerable consumers. And I think what's so exciting, I mean, the numbers that I'm learning today, the 2.6 million additional meals just in Africa, just looking through the lens of staple crops. That's the dividend we get when we're more intentional about this link. Mm-hmm. So that was fabulous. I think Aulo and Apollinaire, as well as Emily Whedon from the World Bank, really kind of drew out this idea of regenerative school meals are the great connector, right? Emily was talking about like this, beautiful chorus of it's the kids to the parents who are the farmers are the voters. Yeah. That whole constituency, right, is connected. Then Mariana kind of threw down the gauntlet of it's great, but it only happens if we really radically reconceptualize how procurement itself has to change from price first to, I loved her frame of like the mission-oriented, challenge-centered procurement. And Kate McKenzie from the mayor's office makes very clear, like that is no small task, but it did get us to the moon, so it is possible. But what I heard for the kind of last hour and a half, really with Mariana's call to action on removing barriers, 5 really came out. So there was that first round around like changing the mechanics of procurement itself. That gets us into law, gets us into contracts. It's the grunt work, but it's got to happen or we're not gonna pull this off. loved Adam Met.
Right.
It was my first time hearing him, and Will Brickerhoff. I mean, they called out one of my cardinal sins that Emily will remind me I commit daily, which is we've got to get the language accessible, right? And I loved the reframe of like, call it what you will. This is just common sense agriculture, because farmers, Gerardo Martinez and his gorgeous son and those beautiful children on the stage, they want to farm next year. And they want to make money next year.
Yeah.
And they want to feed their community next year. So we're just talking common sense. Love it. Love the challenge of the new vocabulary. Third barrier, we heard again from Gerardo, but also from Adam and others, just this need for direct support to farmers. This makes economic sense for farmers, but there is a cost of that transition. Entities like ourselves, philanthropy, but also corporates and government have got to think about, and Maximo offered it to us, repurposing the subsidies already flowing to agriculture that are really holding that business as usual system in place, make that a redirect toward this common sense agriculture that we need to live today and tomorrow. Fourth, I think I loved the way Isabel talked about this barrier that sometimes we don't consider when we focus just on the two far ends we're trying to link, the producer and the consumer, which is the like kitchen infrastructure. You're talking cooks, you're talking food preparers, you're talking distributors, transport. All of that is part of this transition to a regenerative school meal. New recipes are required, new food preparation. Maybe it takes longer to cook. These are really considerable challenges if we don't contend with them. And then the fifth, and it's like, it's one of the taglines I've believed in for a long, long time. We've got to just up-level our collaboration. Everyone's here because we believe in partnership. No one needed to learn Partners Matter by coming here today. But I was flipping through the new industrial revolution manual. Yeah, and it calls for radical collaboration. And I think that's a real invitation for each of us. What does radical collaboration mean to you? How will you do it differently? How do you take the galaxy of partners you met this week, and how do you more meaningfully, inclusively, and authentically partner? And last, with those 5 barriers, if we can meet them, I think there is hope, because we heard from the stage from people that are doing it now in New York City, but also Isabel. And I just, would close with her sort of beautiful visual that a regenerative school meal plate is really a plate full of taste, nutrition, diversity, dignity, and I would add love.
Absolutely. Round of applause for Sarah Farley.
Round of applause for Danny.
Yeah, what a beautiful summing up of it. No one does it better than Sarah Farley. Thank you. Thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation. Thank you to our culinary partner, Great Performances. You get more good food in just a minute. Thank you to WNYC for making this flawless production. They're amazing. Give them a round of applause. The incredible food tank team, thank you. I know you're tired and you're doing such a good job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone who came and spent time with us. I really appreciate it. This doesn't work if you don't come, so thank you so much. And thanks to those tuning in online. Give yourselves a round of applause and then go eat. Yay! You are amazing.